everybody, welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. Matthew Coller here, and tonight we have something that you can only dream of in the month of June, and that is a rumor. But I'm going to throw this out there just as a little PSA before we dive into the show. This is a classic June rumor, which is really more speculation than it is substance. But we're going to dive into where it came from. And as I've probably mentioned before on the show, I Google Minnesota Vikings every day just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. And I see, a rumor about Jordan Addison, a rumor about his future. And I see 14 little websites have popped up with Jordan Addison rumor, Jordan Addison rumor, Jordan Addison rumor. I'm like, what did I miss? So I'm going to read a couple of the quotes from the story about Jordan Addison and the Baltimore Ravens, and then we're going to discuss it. But what I really want to dive into is Jordan Addison's future as a Minnesota Viking. So let me ask you this question first before I dive into the rumor, and we can go from there, and we'll get into the fan chat pretty quickly here on the show. Also a Brendan Sorsby development that came as a bit of a surprise. But what do you think Jordan Addison's future looks like? Like, give me your future projection in the comment section for Jordan Addison. Do you see 75 catches, 1,000 yards, and a huge contract? Like, look into your crystal ball and tell me what you think. Or do you see 40 catches, more struggles to catch the football and concentrate like last year? Do you see a trade in the future? A trade this year? Well, we'll talk about that likelihood, but maybe you see that at the end of training camp, middle of training camp. Dylan Bell is so incredible that they trade Jordan Addison. Give me your crystal ball prediction about his future as I read you this rumor. So the rumor comes via Jason La Canfora from SI.com now. And here's two sentences that I pulled from the article that were the closest that it actually got to a rumor. So La Canfora writes, McCarthy's struggles have plenty to do with the scuttlebutt about Addison, stuck behind a true superstar in receiver Justin Jefferson, and perhaps someone who hasn't always rubbed everyone the right way. And then later in the article, he says, if he does get moved, it's something Ravens general manager Eric DeCosta would be short-sighted not to explore. So just so we're clear, what qualifies as the rumor here is, well, a sentence that says scuttlebutt, which implies that there's talk about Jordan Addison potentially being traded around the NFL, and then says he doesn't rub everyone the right way. I've never had that experience when it comes to Jordan Addison in the locker room or from teammates or from coaches with his showing up to work, putting in the effort, performing on the practice field. He has been outstanding at the training camps that we've seen him over the last couple of seasons and has overall been a very good player for them. But last year, the drops were something that were truly shocking for Jordan Addison, considering that his drop rate had been excellent before, around 5%. And then last year, it almost jumps by 3 times of where it was. But in terms of rubbing people the wrong way, I don't know that I would frame it that way. The way I would frame it is that Jordan Addison has had issues off the field that are concerning. He's already been suspended once, and then he was suspended for a quarter in London or whichever game it was. I forget. I think it was London, right? The London game. So he was suspended for 3 games and a quarter. And when you're talking about like someone getting suspended for their off-field behavior, right away, we're going to have that discussion of like, does the team want to sign up to pay someone long-term? And then, well, it turned out to be mostly a big nothing. And I remember sort of saying, I don't know if it's that uncommon to have someone tossed out of a casino. Still, the fact that even Jordan Addison making headlines before we even got to the Super Bowl was not exactly the best look for Jordan Addison. And when we look down the road a little bit, as of right now, he is a very cheap player with a lot of talent because he remains on his rookie contract. But next year, he has the 5th-year option, which is being estimated about 17 to 19 million. I saw on overthecap.com. I think it was somewhere in that range. So that's going to be a big chunk of change to play on the 5th-year option. But in an ideal world, what you would get is Jordan Addison has so much wild success this year that he gets the T. Higgins contract, and the Vikings are sad to have to pay him so much because of their salary cap, but thrilled that they crushed it out of the park with a first-round wide receiver that they can pair together with Justin Jefferson forever and always going forward. That's what they want to happen. But do they believe that's going to happen? Now, would the Vikings trade Jordan Addison? I think the answer is if things didn't go that great this year and there was headbutting in any way between Addison and the team or just off-field behavior that they weren't very happy with, then trading him at the end of the season would be something that would make sense before he got expensive. Trading him now makes absolutely zero sense. And it seems that, La Canfora is sort of trying to nudge the Baltimore Ravens like, hey, this isn't really a rumor as in I've heard the Ravens want Jordan Addison. It's more of like, shouldn't you be trying to trade for Jordan Addison? So the word rumor is doing a lot of heavy lifting in this instance, but it did make me think this is someone who has been an NFL insider for a long time. Is there actually scuttlebutt about teams calling the Minnesota Vikings about the potential availability of Jordan Addison? Now, the fact that they do have Juwan Jennings here, TJ Hawkinson's still in the mix, they have other young receivers competing for spots. Like, what would it take for a team to actually acquire Jordan Addison from the Minnesota Vikings? What came to mind for me is probably, and this all depends too on how Nolan Teasley feels about Jordan Addison, his long-term outlook, because remember, the Seattle Seahawks, first, they won the Super Bowl with just one number one wide receiver and then a lot of other smaller contributors. They also got rid of their number two wide receiver, DK Metcalf. They were willing to trade him away to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who signed him to a mega contract. There has to be a price, right? That everyone is potentially on the trade block depending on what someone is willing to give up. And if we go down this road of something that I don't think is that probable, I think trading Addison before training camp, the probability is probably about 10% that could happen. Now, trade deadline, if things were not going that well, and if they didn't feel like they wanted to go forward with Addison on a huge contract, if he was struggling, if they didn't like the way that things were going inside and outside of the building, that I could see. That I might bump up to like 20%, depending on how it was going with the team as well. If they were 3-5 at the trade deadline, you have to hear all offers, especially for guys that might not be here long term. And we have seen teams trade away players that are going off of their rookie contract, like a George Pickens. Right. That was the most recent one where Pittsburgh just said, we're not going to keep this guy long term. So we're going to get back whatever we possibly could. And we do know that Nolan Teasley wants to build this team in the future through the draft, or at least that's the strong sense that we've gotten from everything that everyone has said. I would say as of right now, if the Baltimore Ravens are calling the Minnesota Vikings and they want Jordan Addison, I think a first round pick is what you're asking for. And first rounders are, tough to get from other teams, but desperate teams might be willing to do it. You go back a few years and AJ Brown is traded for a first round pick. And wasn't Hollywood Brown actually also in an insane move by the very competent Arizona Cardinals? But that has been a price tag recently. I mean, maybe was George Pickens a second round pick? I forget what he went for, but with Addison, as of right now, you have no purpose whatsoever to trade him. You are going into a season where you have fairly high expectations. Now, on FanDuel, the Vikings over-under is plus, 8.5. And I haven't checked recently. I've been keeping you guys up to date on seeing if the odds change at all with the division. I'll check right now. Have the odds changed at all with the division? They have not. So the Vikings are plus 500 to win the division still. This is a team that the outside world is buying a lot less. If you watch my interview with Mike Clay yesterday, he was saying, I've caught him as a 7.5 win team. I would go with the under because there's so much uncertainty with the roster and so forth. So if you viewed yourself as much less of a contender and someone was willing to give you a second round draft pick for a player you're not going to go forward with, and you feel really good about other receivers on the team, then yeah, that would be something that you would consider doing. As for doing it right now, it would have to be a fifth rounder for me, because I would want fifth rounder, first rounder for me, not a fifth rounder. It would have to be a first rounder for me because I want to see how this plays out first. I would want to have a sense for, is Jordan Addison going to sort of now or never this thing, make it happen? This is your moment for Jordan Addison to show that you are more than just a gifted guy who's had a lot of great catches for the Vikings and a lot of inconsistency and certainly your issues off the field. I would want to see more because Jordan Addison did come into the league very young. That is not an excuse. There's a lot of people that came into the league very young and did not have any of these problems. Dallas Turner is very young. No Dallas Turner problems, right? So it's not an excuse. It's only to say that people can grow up, people can change, they can improve their behavior with age. And with Jordan Addison, his talent is so high that I would want to see if there's an opportunity to keep him long-term. But there is something that's also written in this little sentence with La Canfora where it says, stuck behind a true superstar in Justin Jefferson. This would have to be another factor as well, because if you went to Jordan Addison's representation and you said, look, we understand some of the things that have gone on off the field, and that means, top dollar might be off the table for us because they can start negotiating right now into the summer. And then, next year is kind of the rubber meets the road year, but you can start negotiating now. If you had that conversation and Addison's representation said, look, we believe that this guy is a number one wide receiver. We want to sign somewhere where he could be a number one wide receiver and not behind Justin Jefferson. No matter what you do, we are not going to sign because as long as Jefferson's here, Addison does not feel like he can truly maximize his potential. If they said that, that would change my mind a little bit to maybe a second round draft pick. Get what you can for him as early as you can get that for him. And just move on, and Jawan Jennings will be your wide receiver 2 for now. You'll develop a wide receiver 3 and 4. You've got 2 very good tight ends. You've got a receiving running back in Aaron Jones, and go forward from there. But there are very few situations where I could actually see Jordan Addison being traded anytime soon. But there will be teams, and if you're the Baltimore Ravens, I don't disagree with Jason La Canfora. If you're the Baltimore Ravens, then you should be on the phone. But I guess what I came away wondering from this article is there is certainly nothing definitive, but are people in circles in the league talking about the possibility of Jordan Addison maybe being available to make a trade with the Minnesota Vikings? That would feel like, for this season, it would feel like a lot of wind out of the sails, though. Because we've spent all of this time leading up to this point where there's going to be this quarterback competition, talking about the potential for a bounce back. It was a 9-8 team with abominable quarterback play, and if they just get the good quarterback play, then Jefferson's bouncing back and Addison. And there was something else I wanted to bring up on the show was it was mentioned the other day by Check the Mic podcast, which is my favorite podcast to listen to, Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson, that Steve said in some of his numbers and projections that the Vikings were coming up as a potential bottom 5 roster in the NFL. And so, of course, I was like, bottom 5, what are we talking about? And what really hit me is the number of guys that I think we, being very close to it, intuitively know from seeing a lot of them will bounce back if the quarterback play is good. So if you're using last year's stats to project this year, yeah, man. Addison, what did he catch? 42 balls? It's not good. Jefferson barely squeaked over 1,000 yards. Hockenson wasn't all that involved. Of course, but a major part of the calculation is that, and that Brian Flores can maximize what he can do on the other side of the field, but they did lose a lot of talent there as well. So I could see why that projection might spit out, you lost, Jonathan Grenard, and you lost Hargrave, and you lost Allen. So you should regress there. And on offense, you didn't perform all that well, so you're not going to perform that well again. Whereas I see it as if McCarthy shines, or if Justin Jefferson connects with Kyler Murray, Jefferson and Murray just become best buds, and it's wide receiver 1, it's, DeAndre Hopkins all over again. If that happens, well, then this team's going to be a lot better than bottom of, the NFL. But I need to find out first, and then you can start making your pivots on who's going to be traded, who's in, who's out. and so forth. And if I'm Nolan Teasley, why would I come in right away and send somebody packing unless I really didn't like the person? That doesn't make a lot of sense to me versus seeing how they play in front of me when I actually work for the team and then going from there. But there's always the offer you can't refuse. And I remember when Stephon Diggs got traded, I remember talking to, different radio stations around the country in, that kind of point in the season where things were a little slow. I think it was in February because I believe he got traded in March, right? So, or wherever it was that he got traded. And I was getting a lot of phone calls from other radio stations. Hey, there's all these Diggs rumors, and every single radio station that had me on, I was like, I don't know, guys. I think he's just too good at football. I think you find a way to work it out. And I was wrong. And they eventually did trade Stephon Diggs. So it could happen. But if we're doing a pie chart before we get to your questions and comments, I think the pie chart would probably say traded before the season is 10% chance. Traded at the deadline is probably also maybe like 20% chance. And traded at the end of the season would go up quite a bit to maybe like 20 or 30% chance there. And then 50-50, he's just a Viking on his 5th-year option versus long-term. So maybe I botched another pie chart there, and it's harder than you think to do the math on the fly. But I think it was 10% at the before the season, 10% at the trade deadline. So that's 20. And then after the season, 30% chance that adds up to 50. And then we split 25 and 25 between he signs a big contract or he plays out his 5th-year option, and then they go from there. So what do you think? Look into your crystal ball. Let's have a conversation about Jordan Addison in his future. And I wanted to give one update here that we spent a long time talking about Brendan Sorsby, and myself and every other sports radio station and podcast that was breaking down Sorsby, writing articles about him. Where should you take him in the supplemental draft? And the answer is nowhere, because the NFL will not be having a supplemental draft. And reading up on this decision, it sounds like the NFL was just not compelled by Brendan Sorsby's argument that he should be a part of the supplemental draft. And what it really feels like here is the NFL putting its foot down. You are not going to gamble in college and use us as your backdoor out. No way. Nobody. This is what it screams. It screams Roger Goodell saying nobody uses me to get out from the under consequences except Jim Harbaugh, but not players. Jim Harbaugh, absolutely, because he would have been suspended by college football. But Brendan Sorsby, you're not going to do this, man. And also draws a line in the sand with gambling, I think, as well. That specifically, had he, failed out of college with grades or whatever it might have been, maybe you could work your way around it and do the supplemental draft thing. But when you're talking about somebody who was gambling on their own team, the NFL is decided we are, at least the way I view it, not going to let you get away with that and just come to the NFL through the supplemental draft. So now Brendan Sorsby, I don't know what you do. UFL? Okay, this could be fascinating. What if the UFL next year, well, actually it's already over. Next year it'll be, when the timing doesn't really work out though. Is there another indoor football league? Because the timing doesn't really work out because it takes place after the NFL draft. So, what if no one will touch him? That could happen if no one touches him and he goes to the UFL, but the UFL timing doesn't work out with Sorsby being able to go play there. So how is he going to prove to the NFL that he deserves to be drafted somewhere? Where will someone take him now is a hugely interesting story going into next year. And will the NFL still suspend him for the gambling stuff? Will he try to go running back to college football and say, no, actually bring me back? I have no idea what happens next, but I think that this is really the NFL laying down the law here with Brendan Sorsby and with, hey, if you're going to gamble in college, you're not going to just be able to sneak out the back door and come into the NFL. All right, let's get into your questions, comments, thoughts, and feelings here, and we will dive in and have a good conversation. The question that I asked you folks is, Jordan Addison what does his future look like? Don, I'm glad that you could join. I'm appreciative of you jumping in here. It's not, we don't always do it on a Tuesday, but my week is a little compressed this week because I got something going on later on the week. So I decided Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, let's go. And then was gifted this little conversation. And again, I just want to make clear that when we use the word rumor, it seems more like speculation with a little rumorness layered in. So it's not the hardcore rumor style where someone says Jordan Addison definitely wants out, Vikings are done with him, but there's just a little bit of those, rub people the wrong way, or a little bit of, scuttlebutt is a word out there. This one is quite subtle. Dan says, I'm okay with trading Addison, good player, but can't imagine paying him 25 plus million. So that really depends, right, on what his performance is like this year. Because if we look at the number 2 wide receivers in the NFL, most of them are getting paid somewhere in the ballpark of $23 to $28 million. And those are guys that are putting up big numbers. They're driving quarterback success. And quarterback success is still the number one thing that will get you deep into the playoffs. Defense, of course, is right there. But quarterback success is, last year you had the number 1 and number 2 teams playing in the Final Four when it comes to quarterback performance, expected points added, driven by the passing game. You had Matthew Stafford and Drake May are right there. It's always going to be that way, no matter how much teams run and play defense and so forth. Quarterback play is going to get you there. And what drives quarterback play is supporting casts most of the time. Unless you have Josh Allen, then you don't need great wide receivers, but everybody else tends to. And think about the next bet that the Vikings have to make. If Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy do not turn into guys that they want to have as their long-term quarterbacks. So let's say that they split the games this year, 9-8, and that's what they end up with for a record. McCarthy's okay. It's not awesome. Murray's okay. It's not awesome. It's a mediocre season again. And now you're looking to the NFL draft. Well, you're not going to get the first overall draft pick if you're 9-8. And you're probably looking at maybe trading up or seeing who slips through the cracks a little bit, drafting in the middle of the first round, which means what? If you have Bo Nix, for example, who is a middle first round draft pick, what do you need is a supporting cast to prop him up, right? You're not going to get the cream of the crop. And even then, the cream of the crop guys still need help. You can't give them nothing at the top, as we saw from like Cam Ward last year. And lots of top draft picks have struggled. Lots of top draft picks have had to go somewhere else to succeed. Sam Darnold is one of them. Like, most quarterbacks need help. What can you do better? I think that the theory about JJ McCarthy was actually right. It's just the execution didn't happen. But the idea that you could give a young quarterback 2 of the best receivers in the world, I mean, that in that instance, yes, you can. And so Addison's future may be impacted by what happens at the quarterback position. And that's why the Vikings probably have to wait and see on this. Because if you're drafting a first-round quarterback next year, then you want Jordan Addison, and you can give him the money that would have been going to Kyler Murray. But if you sign Murray to a 3-year extension worth, I don't know, $130 million, $140 million, that becomes a lot more difficult to then also throw that cash at Jordan Addison. We're talking about an O'Neal extension. Darisaw is very expensive, and Justin Jefferson's going to have to redo that contract again, probably after this year, if he's going to be a Viking long-term. So then it does become a little bit more tricky. And that's why I see this entire Addison situation as one where you are going to play it based on what you see in front of you. What happens this year and into the future, not just with him, but also the context of the entire team, that will dictate what your move is with Jordan Addison, unless somebody shows up at your doorstep and says, we're just going to make you an offer so good that you just give us Jordan Addison because you need this for the future. And that would be the argument for trading Jordan Addison, is when you look around at this roster in the future, in 2027. Yep, you've got Jefferson. Yep, you've got Christian Darisaw. But aside from that, I mean, are you good enough to really be a true competing team for a Super Bowl next year, if Van Ginkel is gone, if Cashman is gone, if you're very young on the defensive side, if Harrison Smith doesn't come back, then what do you really have to work with as a roster? Are you really competing with the best teams in the NFL in 2027? Well, you can make it happen pretty quickly if you get first round picks. The Seattle Seahawks, for example, they never tanked, but they did have 2 top 10 draft picks playing in the Super Bowl. And that was Devon Witherspoon and Charles Cross. Both guys, one of them came from the Russell Wilson trade. So, these things, that is a team that moved on from Russell Wilson. Like, they were good at that in Seattle, at figuring out when players would have their maximum amount of potential in the trade market. Son of Beavers says 2 first-round picks are no deal, and the other team must include their punter. Well, at least give Johnny Hecker a chance and Brett Thorson. But 2 firsts, nobody's doing that. I mean, a first-round draft pick, though, if Baltimore were to call up and say, we'll give you our first-round pick for Jordan Addison, you have to at least listen to that offer. That is a really hard one to turn down if you don't have long-term plans for him. If you do, well, then it's different. But this is where, if you wait and see how it plays out, the maximizing the potential price is difficult. Because let's just say the Vikings aren't playing that well. Well, that probably means that Jordan Addison isn't playing that well. And if he has a bad season last year and a bad half a season this year, that price that might be a first-round pick now from a good team suddenly turns into maybe a 3rd-round draft pick that teams are offering at the deadline, because they're only getting a half a year of him in a 5th-year option as opposed to getting, the 2 full years. So that is a factor you have to consider, is that the price tag will probably not be higher than it is right now. And because if he has an unbelievable season, then you're going to more likely than not keep him. AP Carlin says, I think we need June rumors are just rumors ticker line. Absolutely, it's true. And there's some interesting little sentences written into Jason La Canfora's report. And I don't want to disrespect the NFL insider who's got a little something to toss out there for everybody in June, because, hey, the Google was showing it up everywhere with a little rumor, and we're having a conversation. But that's why I wanted to really make this about a discussion of one of the Vikings' more interesting players. When you think about Jordan Addison's path in Minnesota, I mean, it started out incredibly well, other than his off-field driving, where he was going 140 miles an hour when he was pulled over. But his first year was outstanding. And I remember Kirk Cousins just saying halfway through the season in a press conference, just going, well, they nailed that draft pick because he loved Jordan Addison, the contorted catches that he's able to make, shifting his body in the middle of the air like it's the Matrix. He's got great hands until last year. He's made a lot of great catches over the years. 2024, he and Sam Darnold were on the same page as a deep weapon. He's been a really, really darn good football player. And then last year happens, and it's not only the suspension, but it also is the other mini suspension and the drops, and just maybe not the same level of engaged and locked in as we've seen Jordan Addison before. So that does bring you to a point where you have to at least hear the phone calls if they are happening. And that was kind of how I took this, was in terms of a June rumor is, well, there maybe, when he says scuttlebutt, like maybe teams are around the league saying, is it possible? Like, is it possible for us to trade for Jordan Addison? Because I don't think it's right around the corner. Mama says, only trade him if we suck this year and trade at the deadline for max value. Yeah, I mean, I think the max value is right now because nothing has happened. And if he plays 7 or 8 games and is mediocre, what did Jacoby Myers get traded for last year, right? Like, now he's better than Jacoby Myers, but not wildly better. So the price in the offseason, when everybody's got hype, nobody's got injuries, nobody's got disappointment. And this is something that we've seen so much of around the NFL. Like, look at last year. What did the Jets have? Like 3 first-round draft picks. Teams that trade stars have often been really rewarded for it. The way that the Jets have quickly have put together some nice weapons, though I don't think that they're going to be good this year. I think the next coach is probably going to be good with the New York Jets. But the fact that they could move out like a Quinnen Williams, they could trade away some key players and suddenly have a bunch of young weapons around their quarterback, like just like that, is something that you have to consider if you're the Vikings, because long-term roster wise, there's only so much to work with here. I mean, there's this year's draft class, and then what? Then not a lot of players from previous draft classes. Donovan Jackson, very promising. I really like where Levi Drake Rodriguez is. Jalen Redmond could be a good long-term player for you. He's not super young, but he could play for 5 more years for the Vikings if it works out. You've got a handful of pieces. We don't know what Jay Ward really is. I don't think we fully have a feeling for Theo Jackson, but then basically if you're talking about future pieces, it's just all this year's draft class and then Donovan Jackson, and that's it. So you have to think about, well, what is really the long-term? Could you sacrifice one player for potential long-term where you could get, another starter, maybe somebody that you trust more, and a lot of cap space? When you make a trade like that, you get a player and you get all the cap space to spend on other players. That's how Jonathan Grenard gets traded. It's like, once you start adding it up, well, Grenard, 2 players, and then what was it? I don't know, $25 million in cap space, $30 million in cap space over 2 years, something like that. Like, well, that's like 3 players in free agency. So there is math that makes it work. I just don't see, like, Nolan Teasley, I think, would have to pry Jordan Addison out of Kevin O'Connell's cold, dead hands. I think O'Connell really, really likes Jordan Addison. I think he believes he's a phenomenal wide receiver with remarkable upside, but that has to be met. And the first 2 years were good, and last year was not. So you have no great years, 2 good years, and 1, I would say, poor year, mediocre at best. Well, is that enough to pay someone $28 million, $25 million a year? It's definitely not. Like, I think it has to be proven first. KJMN says he's going to have a good year to have good trade value. Tomcat says I'd trade him, buy low and sell high. So when you're talking about like having a good year, that's where they could be putting conflict a little bit. If Jordan Addison catches 60 balls for 800 yards and he scores 9 touchdowns, like, how much is that worth? I mean, is that worth $20 million? Like, probably. Is it worth 30? No, I don't think it is. And the thing that you really have to consider is if they have a good season, Justin Jefferson signs another extension that basically almost ensures he's a Viking for life, or at least gets as close as you possibly can. He is the earth, the moon, and the stars and the sun, right? Like, everything else is just revolving around him with the offense, but he is the center of this entire thing, of the stratosphere, and everything else is just around him. The running game, the tight end, the number 2, number 3 wide receiver, it's Jefferson, and then everything else. So could you afford, or could someone else be able to put together similar numbers and similar performances? Could you afford to have a quality number 2 wide receiver gone, knowing that your number 1 is going to draw so much attention that other number 2s are going to be successful? Now, as you know, from listening to the show for a long time, all of you, every single one of you is subscribed, right? Then you know what? That, I personally look at it as many wide receivers and as many weapons as you can possibly get. And they're not easy to find. And this is why, because you usually either have to trade a lot for them or you have to sign them for crazy amounts of money, but rarely do the good ones become available. It's usually by trade that they do. But if the Vikings were drafting another one next year and developing Felton, developing the younger players that they have behind him, and then putting Juwan Jennings at the number 2 position, I mean, I don't like it as much, but that type of production that we just laid out, like 60 catches for 750 to 80 yards or 800 yards, I mean, is that worth paying that much and sacrificing where you could distribute the rest of those dollars for a position that is probably much more favorable, that there are other wide receivers in the NFL who could be wide receiver 2 and succeed? I mean, you think about the first couple of games in 2024, Addison was not healthy, and so he's banged up, and Jalen Naylor steps in and performed just fine, and the offense was good. I mean, I remember Naylor making a big catch against the 49ers that was kind of a dagger in that game. And was Addison out of that one? I mean, he was out. He was at least banged up a little bit with the ankle stuff. Had a big touchdown catch also against the Giants that year as well. So, I mean, is there some evidence there that you can, like, life will go on without Jordan Addison? Tom would trade him. Mama says if we trade Addison, I'd hope that we draft a wide receiver in the first round. I mean, that's maybe would be the plan, or second round. You might be spending a first round on like an edge rusher or potentially a quarterback would be also possibly in the mix. Dan is projecting 67 receptions for 972 yards and 8 touchdowns. So if that's what he ended up with, that's a lot of yards per catch, Dan. I don't know if in a Kyler Murray world that you end up with that many receptions. And Gazinkat, I understand where you're coming from with, certain reporters that you trust or don't trust. And that, reputation for the NFL insider, unfortunately, is fair to think of it that way. But for this purpose, though, I mean, I think it just opens up a bigger conversation about one of the most interesting and important players on the Minnesota Vikings. If they're going to go far this year, then, and this is why you don't trade Jordan Addison now. If you're going to go far this year, you need a season like Dan is throwing out there. 67 receptions, almost 1,000 yards, 8 touchdowns. And if that was what Jordan Addison did, then I think you're probably looking at like a Christian Watson type contract where when you guys saw the initial numbers for Christian Watson, your eyes popped out of your head. But then when you actually looked at the real numbers, it was like, okay, it's much more of a 2-year deal that isn't really worth anywhere near as much as the agent's numbers through the NFL Insider would suggest. And I think the Vikings could work out something with Addison that is kind of a hedge contract. Like, yes, it gets him a lot of money in his pocket, but guaranteed and lengthwise is pretty flexible. And that's the way it is for Christian Watson. Kit says, I'm not convinced that Addison could be a true number 1 wide receiver with his inconsistencies on and off the field and his size, but that doesn't mean that I want him gone. If they move him, I would hope for near Percy Harvin value. You'll have to refresh me on what they got for Harvin. Was it like a first round pick from Seattle when they traded him? Was that the move? Don't remember the return for that, but in terms of the inconsistencies to be a true wide receiver 1, I tend to agree with you. I also think that Jordan Addison has benefited from, and this is not a knock because he can't do anything about this, he cannot ask safeties to cover him. But one time Addison said that he didn't think he's ever had double coverage. I'm sure somewhere along the line that he did, but basically, if you watch the tape, I mean, everybody is directed toward Justin Jefferson on a very high percentage of the plays. So someone like Jordan Addison does have an advantage there to be successful. And last year it just wasn't. And even in 2024, it was spotty. And I do agree with the inconsistent element, although we do have to admit that everyone is going to be inconsistent when Justin Jefferson's around. Like, everyone not named Justin Jefferson will have their weeks and have weeks where Jefferson gets 10 catches for 150 yards and no one else sees the football. That was something that KJ Osborne talked about when he was a Viking, was you got to be ready at any time, but there will be 3 weeks in a row where you just don't really get the football because Justin is going crazy. And then maybe later in the season, it's your day. So I think that plays into it. From a skill set perspective, he is a good enough route runner to be a number 1. He's a good enough contested catch guy, but the size at some point does matter a bit. I mean, can you have a chance to take him out of the game better with physical play at the line of scrimmage? I think the answer is probably yes. That he's gotten better at defeating that stuff as he's gone along, but still, like, there is a factor to the size element. I would say he's like a fringe one. I was thinking about, for whatever reason today, like Calvin Ridley. Like, Calvin Ridley on certain teams was a number 1, but not like the best teams. So he could be serviceable there, but he's much better as a number 2. But that doesn't mean Jordan Addison thinks that. It doesn't mean his representation thinks that, which could factor into a decision of whether to move on from him or not. PY3148 says in the crystal ball that Jordan Addison gets traded before the deadline. So this is going to be incredibly fascinating as we approach the trade deadline. For most seasons, I've sort of been like, I don't know, make a trade. Who knows? 2024, your team's good. Maybe just take a swing at it. I don't know. And in 2022, I remember feeling like this is the last run that this team is ever going to have together. So go for it. Everybody's pretty much gone after 2022. So go get TJ Hawkinson. And they did. And he caught a check down at the end, but he turned out to be a good player overall that they traded for. Right. So, there's been a few seasons, but it hasn't been many where they've actually been super active at the deadline. And, we can definitely go back to 2023 where they maybe should have been, or 2020 where they should have been sellers and they decided not to be, but that wasn't with Nolan Teasley in charge. That's where it could be potentially different, is with Nolan Teasley in charge. These are not his players. These are not his draft picks. This is his vision for the future. And Teasley, especially if the team starts out 500, below 500, if you're, 3-5 or 3-4 to start the season, and you just look like an okay team, but there isn't really anything that happens in those first 7 weeks that suggests that you're going to be a team that can really chase a Super Bowl. What you should be thinking at that point then is, well, who's going to stay and who's going to go? And Addison could be on that list if someone's desperate. Let's say Baltimore is 6-1 and their one problem is wide receiver at the trade deadline, and the Vikings are 3-4. They come with a first round draft pick. Hey, this is the year for Lamar. It's going to happen. Jesse Minter's defense is great. These scenarios could play out. Christopher says, realistically, Addison is probably only worth a second or third, but I wouldn't want to give him away for anything less than a first. If the Ravens gave us flowers and some change, I would do that. I think the idea, if you're the Ravens, is that you pair them together, right? That you have Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison as two guys who are very, talented wide receivers as a duo, which to Lamar Jackson's credit, I guess, the guy's never really had that. He's had good receivers come and go, but he's never really had a group of weapons. He's had a good tight end, but not a group of wide receivers who you could argue was anywhere near the top 15 or top 10 in the league. It's just been old DeAndre Hopkins. They had Hollywood Brown for a little bit. The guys have kind of bounced around. If they had Flowers and Addison, then they would look like they were a very serious contending team. But I agree with you that if I am Baltimore or any other team that's in need of a wide receiver, I am not sending a first round draft pick until I know that I'm good for sure. Because at Baltimore, you could have Lamar Jackson get banged up like he did early last year and they lose a bunch of games and we just trade a first round pick and now we're not even good. So I think for every team, waiting and seeing is more of the option. But then if you're ever going to get a first round pick for Jordan Addison, which I don't know, it's hard to see, but if you're ever going to get a first round pick for Addison and, Jalen Waddle, that, maybe it's a similar situation to Jalen Waddle where it could happen. It's now though, because once the train leaves the station for 2026, it's like a car taking it off the lot. The minute you take your brand new car off the lot, it's worth less than you bought it for. And the same thing goes for this year with Jordan Addison, unless he's unbelievable. But if he's unbelievable, you're probably winning. So if he's just average, okay, whatever, and you're 3-4, you're not getting a first round pick for him. But now when people are optimistic, when people are desperate, when people are trying to save jobs, they're trying to keep quarterbacks around long term, then, it does become more realistic. Mad Rat, if we are below 500 at the trade deadline, I believe Addison will be traded, maybe 2 second-round draft picks. Yeah, trying to put a value on it really is hard because what's the desperation level of the team that's making the trade? That's where it's going to be the rubber meets the road with how much he gets traded for if they were going to do it. But yeah, if you're 3-4 and a team comes to you and says, we want Jordan Addison, I think you probably at that point take 1 second round pick if you believe that he's not going to be a part of what you're doing for the long term. If they were 3-4 and they had a top 5 offense somehow and Jordan Addison was amazing, maybe it's different. I just have trouble seeing that happening. If they have a top 5 offense, they'll probably be 6-1 or 5-2. 2 second rounders might be a little on the high side, but also desperation might be a little on the high side. Kit says he could go for 1,000 yards, but I can't see him putting much more than that unless, Jefferson gets hurt. But even when Jefferson was hurt a couple of years ago, it wasn't quite that level. I think that he is a true super high end number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, which is definitely worth a first round draft pick in the offseason. And if he plays well and he's getting traded at the trade deadline, still worth probably a second round pick because those guys are hard to find. But that's the issue for the Vikings with trying to decide whether to make a deal for Jordan Addison. I mean, I don't think that they want to do it. I think what they would like to see is Kyler Murray play great with him and then have a much tougher decision on how much to negotiate and pay him after next year. But if it's just okay, like the last year's performance opens up the door for the discussion. If he caught everything that JJ McCarthy threw and hit him in the hands with, then we would be talking differently about this. Like, yeah, McCarthy, he mentions La Canfora, that McCarthy had his problems. He most certainly did. But when throwing to Jordan Addison, there were more than a few times. There's one against Chicago really stands out, like right in the midst. And yeah, I know he throws the ball really hard. I know it might not be ideal, but we expect a first round draft pick who is potentially looking for a huge payday to make catches like that at a fairly high rate. And there were too many that just looked like concentration drops. Maybe the level of engagement for Addison with a team that was struggling to pass the football dropped when he wasn't getting as many targets. I don't know. That's where you start to ask these questions, because if he had performed well, then they wouldn't be asking it. Dan, this is a great reference that Brendan Sorsby is doing the sad George Michael Bluth Snoopy walk right now. Oh, yeah. Yes, he is. Yeah, that's Arrested Development. Tremendous show. If you've never seen it, then go to Netflix and watch it. It's very good. But you're right. Yeah, what is Brendan Sorsby supposed to do? It sounds in general like he was just not convincing to the NFL, but I think the NFL is also working pretty hard to justify what they've done here within the rules of the supplemental draft, which they have a decision they can have it or not. It's up to them. But I also think that it's clear that they are sending a message to Brendan Sorsby and to the rest of college football. They are making an example out of him, which I think is completely fine to make an example out of Sorsby. I mean, look, he did it, and it doesn't seem like they are convinced about, how contrite he is or what he's done to really resolve the issue. And they also didn't seem compelled by his, application or whatever to do the supplemental draft. So, whatever. But that's going to make the draft fascinating. Does anybody just take a swing? I think you get to day 3. It's like the Shadur Sanders thing. Yeah, like no one really likes what they saw from Shadur Sanders, but 5th round, what the heck? And even then he brought the circus to town with the Cleveland Browns. But I don't think that Sorsby brings circus to town. I just think that, this thing that happened with him is very possible to happen with other players, and the NFL does not want it to become a backdoor getting out of the consequences of what you did in college. Son of Beaver, 76 catches for 1,025 yards and 8 touchdowns get him traded for a first in 2020, first in 2028, third in 2027, and 5th in 2027. I mean, I just can't see that much production unless this offense throws for 4,500 yards, which I guess is possible. Anything is possible. I think this team is much more hovering around like 36 to 3,800 yards, but I suppose if they got in a bunch of games like 2022 where they had to keep throwing and throwing and throwing because the defense was struggling, then you could see Jordan Addison putting up big numbers like that. Going into the end of the season, he has a huge year like that. I just am hard pressed to believe that Addison would be traded at that point. I think Addison would be signed at that point, and they would have to make tough decisions on other players. CFL would make sense for Sorsby. UFL would have been really fascinating for this. Like the UFL has got to be so mad that they are over. Like, can we restart? Can we restart the season and have another year of the UFL so Sorsby could come in? But I don't know what the CFL situation is. I do know this though about the CFL is Manziel tried to go play there. Josh Freeman tried to go play there. It is not as easy as people think. The rules are very different. The game is very different, and you have to really learn it and understand it to be able to play quarterback there. You can't just be like, yo, I'm a good quarterback, I'm going to go play in the CFL. That's kind of like how NFL players tried to play flag football with the guys who really play flag football, and you're like, oh, this is not NFL football or anywhere close. I'm not saying CFL is flag football. It's a very serious league. It's physical and everything else, but it's just different. It's a whole different game. But yeah, I mean, that might be what he does. Albert says it's hard to picture a well-constructed team while paying 2 receivers top dollar from a team building standpoint. And I think that it makes more sense to trade him at some point next offseason or the trade deadline. So this is a really good observation, Albert, is like the team building aspect of, can you keep Jordan Addison? So even if he has that year that Son of Beavers laid out and he goes for over 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns, great season, can you really afford to keep him long term? So I think the answer is, let's just call it kinda, because if you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, they finally started moving money around and they made the trade for Dexter Lawrence, and then they gave Dexter Lawrence a big contract. They also signed Boye Mafe, they let go Trey Hendrickson, and they've added some parts to their offensive line, added some parts to their defensive line. Like Cincinnati has done a lot with that team, but still, when you look at Cincinnati's roster, it does not make you think, wow, this is going to be like the next great roster in the NFL. It makes you think this is a top heavy roster with a handful of players that are very good. And then, some filler and some hope and some dreams that your quarterback is going to drive you the rest of the way. And so are the star players. If you're a believer, and this may be like, these are 2 different philosophies that are probably splitting the NFL. So let's talk about them, because this is a really good comment. You can either try to stack superstar talent. This would be like Dallas. Dallas has CeeDee Lamb, and Dak Prescott's paid a lot of money. They've got offensive linemen that are paid a lot, right? They try to be, and maybe Dallas recently is just not that great, but like a couple years ago, Dallas had all these they traded for Quinn Williams. No, Dallas is a great example. They traded for Quinn Williams. They did trade away Micah Parsons, but they got, Kenny Clark back, but they trade for Quinn Williams. They're paying him a lot of money. So they are a top heavy team. They're hoping that CeeDee Lamb drives them. They're hoping Dak Prescott drives them. They're hoping that Quinn Williams drives them. And then you have other teams that are built a little bit more to having complete rosters, but a little less on the superstar talent. So maybe you're not doing the Rams thing where you're paying, Myles Garrett and Matthew Stafford and Devontae Adams. You have all these big names and then you fill in the rest. Whereas even a Seattle, they might be an argument for, they did it methodically. They were willing to get rid of players. They were not willing to pay Geno Smith. They were not willing to pay DK Metcalf, and they spread that money around. So a little to DeMarcus Lawrence over here, a little to, different free agents that you might bring in. Rashid Shaheed ends up as a trade deadline guy that they bring in. So you could kind of aim for what's the most accumulation of players or what's the absolute best players that you could bring in. You can win with both for sure. But if you're sitting in Nolan Teasley's seat, like, do you believe that one player at the wide receiver position making $25 million and another guy making soon $45 million? I think that's where Justin Jefferson is going to push the dollar figure if he has another good year. So you're talking $70 million there. And then your offensive tackles, $60 million with those. You are now the top heavy roster. I don't know if top heavy has worked for the Vikings. Like the best roster they've had in the last 10 years was 2017. That was more complete. It was more built through the draft. They had a lot of cheap players on rookie contracts in 2017, and they were quite deep in 2017, but they became a top heavy roster as they went forward with superstars at certain positions, but then not really the depth consummate with what it needs to go deep in the playoffs. So from that argument, I think you would say trade him at some point rather than pay him. Jay says, what do you think? I would wait until the trade deadline. If we are in the playoff hunt, then keep him. If we trade him, does that mean Juwan Jennings gets a longer contract? Like, not necessarily. For this year, I think what it would mean is if you traded him right now, that you would be saying we can certainly compete with Juwan Jennings and Ty Felton and Dylan Bell if Bell can play, and Miles Price and maybe whatever else, like, right? Whoever else develops from that group. that we can play with that. We could play bigger personnel, put 2 tight ends, put Max Bredesen out there, right? And you'll be fine. And we'll pump the ball to Justin Jefferson the same way Seattle did to Jackson Smith and Jigba. And it's going to all work out in the end. And you'll be shocked how much you don't miss Jordan Addison, because other wide receivers are perfectly capable of playing in one-on-one coverage. I mean, there's an argument there to make that case and get as much as you possibly can. But I don't think you'd be saying that means Jawan Jennings is he 29 years old, is going to get a multi-year deal. Maybe you change your mind if you love him after this year, and then you go, okay, well, Jawan Jennings was too awesome to let go. We're going to sign him to a multi-year contract. But I think in the best case scenario there, what you would do is you'd probably draft another receiver in the second round. A lot of talent in the second round. I looked at this last year during the draft because I was convinced the Vikings were going to pick a wide receiver, and they did not. But I was looking, and historically, second, third round has been a really good place to get solid to quality wide receivers, which is all you really need next to Justin Jefferson. That's where the argument starts to make sense. $25 million to the rest of the roster. Pretty decent odds someone will succeed as a second or third round draft pick wide receiver next to Justin Jefferson. You can get number 3 wide receivers in free agency. You just can't get number 1 wide receivers, or really even number 2 in free agency. So if I was giving you a first round draft pick and you're going to use a second or possibly one of your 2/3, I mean, if they had 2 firsts and 2/3 going into next year's draft, I don't know how much you're missing Jordan Addison. So there is a case for that. Don says, is there anything that we can learn from the way Seattle handled off-field issues with players concerning behavior that we could extrapolate to the Addison conversation? So I don't know about that. I don't recall any specific big case that Seattle had with the off-field issues. Luckily for the NFL and all of its players, this doesn't really come up as much that often. I mean, it does where there's off-field issues, but there was once upon a time in the NFL where it felt like it was every other week that there was something. And yeah, it would have been easier. There was an early website that kind of blew up on the internet. It was like NFLarrest.com or something like that. It was just like, man, there's just so many issues with some of these guys off the field. And there still are, like, it still comes up, but I don't recall. If someone remembers one, let me know, but I don't recall too many issues with Seattle. And with Addison, the thing about off-field issues is that we often use this one big umbrella and just go off-field issues when every single one of them has nuances. Addison's driving-wise and self-awareness-wise is certainly incredibly concerning. And every day you wake up, you do have to wonder, if you're Kevin O'Connell, am I going to look at my phone and see that Jordan Addison has had some other problem? It is not domestic violence. It is not harming another person or something like that. And I've never heard anything from inside the locker room that people were down on Jordan Addison. I mean, in terms of his work ethic and how he goes out and performs at practice, I mean, he's always one of the best players in training camp. So I don't have a huge doubt about that. But there have been times during the season I've wondered about focus. Even in 2024, there was kind of a wrong route that cost them against the Detroit Lions early in the season, or a wrong route depth. And you went like, is he really locked in? And I've wondered if he's had trouble staying locked in at times when Justin Jefferson's getting all of the attention. But, off-field issues, I mean, if there's guys with domestic violence stuff, that's very different than someone who has had, an issue with driving, which of course could lead to, something like that. Up North says trading Addison will be a death sentence of KOC. It could be. It could be that they wouldn't be able to pass the ball enough and they wouldn't be able to have enough success. And that's why I wouldn't do it right now, because with Kevin O'Connell, when he said at the combine that the timeline has changed, well, you're not on a timeline right now that says trade one of your better players. You are on a timeline right now that says go win. When we go across the roster, like, how many players in this locker room are here that kind of need to win? Like, it's because there's not that many years left to win in the NFL in their careers. I mean, Aaron Jones, he came back. Did he come back to see them trade one of their better players? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Unless they don't back it up on the field. Brian O'Neill is another one. Blake Cashman, Andrew Van Ginkel. Like, there's a lot of veterans on this team who have been in the league for a while, and there's a coach that needs to win. With Kevin O'Connell, his odds of winning a playoff game are definitely lower if Jordan Addison is not there. But one thing that I will say is that we tend to overvalue individual players. That every year there's somebody who gets hurt and we go, oh, well, this team will never survive without them. And then a couple weeks into the season, we've sort of forgotten that that player got hurt and the team is succeeding and whatever, because people get hurt a lot. So lopping off one player off your team that isn't your best player, like Justin Jefferson, is the impact quite as much as we think it is when we're sort of simulating the season in our brains? I think that that's worth asking as they have this discussion as well. Don says, is there a likelihood due to Murray adjusting and building on a middle depth target consistency that maybe Jennings moves into that wide receiver 2 spot and they decide to move on from Addison at the trade deadline? I think if they're moving on from Addison at the trade deadline, the only reason that they would be doing it would be because he's not playing well and they're not playing well. Now, your observation, I think, is a good one, that Jauan Jennings is more of an intermediate type receiver, underneath type receiver. And you could see from a chemistry perspective of Kyler Murray just connecting with that guy and hitting him on underneath throws. Although I do think we need to give Kyler some credit that one of the reasons so many of his throws were underneath was because his only really talented weapon was Trey McBride. So he leaned on his most talented weapon the same way that Kirk Cousins leaned on his most talented weapon, which was, of course, Justin Jefferson. It's quite the different thing with the average depth of target, but I do think they want the ball to come out of his hands quicker. And so there might be times where Jauan Jennings is a guy who's getting leaned on more, but I would be very surprised if, like, Kyler was playing super well and Addison's numbers weren't that good, if they were like, you know, what we should do is just get rid of Jordan Addison. I think what they'd look at it as, this thing will even out over a long season. The only scenario that I could see where Addison is being traded at the deadline is if they're just not good. And then you have to seriously consider it. And it could, if they're not good at the deadline, oh my gosh, it could be a wild trade deadline because there's at least 3 or 4 guys. As of this moment, we'll see if they extend Brian O'Neill, but there's at least 3 or 4 guys that you could absolutely see them looking to trade. And that would be the biggest one, would be Jordan Addison. But I still think that what they would prefer is to be competitive and have Jordan Addison succeed and then have a tough conversation at the end of the year. Now, if Jauan Jennings with Kyler Murray ends up, having a lot more success than Addison this year, which I think would be pretty surprising, but I suppose it's possible, then you might get to the end and say, well, the guy only got 53 catches and it just wasn't really that great. So he's demanding $25 million a year. It's time to move on and trade him to someone else. I could see that. Mad Red says it's a GM move and not a KOC move. Yep. I definitely think that it is a Nolan Teasley thing because everything on the roster is now Nolan Teasley. Yes, he's going to take advice from the coaches. He is going to take a ton of feedback from the coaches. They're going to try to be on the same page with stuff. But final 53, he's the one that holds the gavel that will declare this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing. So if Kevin O'Connell loves Jordan Addison to the end of the earth, but Nolan Teasley finds it better to trade him, he's getting traded, I would assume, because you can't do things just to please the coach. You have to do the right thing. And that's where I think that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah actually got in trouble. I think that he did things to try to please the coaching staff at times and like, hey, they want this, they need this, so I'm going to try to go get it, and overpaid for some stuff and made some anti-analytical moves and draft picks in the name of trying to do what he could for the coaches rather than, I think, what the numbers would have said to actually do. So with Nolan Teasley, you want him to do what his front office, that's why they're there. That's why he's got 2 assistant general managers and is bringing in new people to make decisions based on what they think the best is for the long term of the Minnesota Vikings and not just what the head coach wants. Yeah, sorry, I said 5th round draft pick. Mama, can we do what the Wolves did with Julius Randle and trade McCarthy for a bag of chips? You know what, though? There is actually a connection here, though. There is a connection with this discussion and Julius Randle is that The Wolves just looked at Julius Randle and said it's not worth it. He's not the most efficient player. The ball gets stuck on him sometimes. He's taken away from some other players, and the money is not good for Julius Randle, so you're going to move out a good player. Randle is a good player. I mean, people trash him so much, but he is a good player. But sometimes you have to move on from good players to open up the doors for other people and for other cap space that you can spend on the rest of the roster. I think it's actually a good comparison. JG Berserker, absolutely shop Addison. They aren't going to pay him, so get what you can now. I think that paying him really depends on where they're at with the rest of the roster and the quarterback situation. If you ended up with, maybe it was like not a great year and you're moving on and you're really clearing out a lot of space. And by that, I mean, like, let's just say 9-8. Even if you make the playoffs at 9-8, you're knocked out in the first round. Okay, well, Kyler Murray, it was great with the memories, but we're going to draft a quarterback this year. Could have 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the first round, potentially. All right, there you go. And we're going to draft a quarterback. Thank you very much. And Addison comes to the table and says, how about $23 million a year, $25 million a year? It's like, okay, we don't love that. But at the same time, if you're drafting a first round quarterback, there's nothing better you can give him than a wide receiver duo. And the Vikings know this as well as anyone, not just from 3 deep, but also Jefferson and Thielen, Diggs and Thielen. Look at how those guys had enhanced quarterbacks. I mean, Kirk Cousins was very blessed to have receivers that good while he was in Minnesota. And the same thing goes for Case Keenum, Sam Bradford. Like, these guys all played their best version that they ever played in the NFL with these wide receiver duos, and so did Sam Darnold. And then Darnold goes and has Smith-Njigba and kind of a different type of offense, but he still had Cooper Kupp on the team. It wasn't like he had nobody outside of Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, a lot of quarterbacks, their success is very much helped by having a second option as teams put so much emphasis on the first guy. But if you're signing Kyler to a huge deal and you don't love the way Addison played, then it's a different conversation. But I think if you're talking about bringing in a rookie, you would love to have as many receivers as you possibly can. But I didn't even really think about, till this came out, the concept of, like, what if he doesn't want to stay? What if he doesn't want to sign? What if his view of himself is, I am a wide receiver 1 and that's where I should be? Now, if that is the case, then yes, you want to make a move. BM, fine with trading Addison. He's an excellent number 2, but I have zero faith he'll not embarrass the team. Get out while he has value. So if they were to trade Jordan Addison now, and look, we don't know, like, there could always be other things that have happened behind the scenes that didn't make it to the police blotter that we don't know about. And that happens sometimes with teams where, gosh, you hear like 5 years later, somebody says, oh yeah, this happened. And nobody ever found out. And you're like, okay, well, that changes everything. That happens sometimes in the NFL. Things are going on that don't get out to the public. So if there's something like that, then yeah, I could see that argument. And you're right. When you've had enough strikes against you, at some point, it's just very hard to trust or believe that you can go forward with this person, especially when you put a lot more money in their pocket. And he is an excellent number 2, but if he wants to get paid like a 1A, that just can't really happen. He's got to be paid, or a 1B. It can't really happen. He's got to be paid like a true number 2, which is the range of, really number 2 wide receiver, probably the lowest end of that is like 17 million, but he's not the lowest end. Highest end is 28, might extend to 30 because that T. Higgins deal was 2 years ago. So if you're Addison, you're probably coming to the table saying 30. And if you're the Vikings, you just can't do that. You just can't. I don't think you could do 30 a year for Jordan Addison with the risk that he presents. And then also just with the money that you're going to have wrapped up in Justin Jefferson. I don't care how many Amazon deals they do, 75 mil at your wide receiver room. It better be T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And one of those things is equal. I don't know that the other one is. Don says, is there a likelihood with Murray? I already answered that question. Up North says trading him for next year's pick is stupid. If they were going to trade him, they should have done it before this year's draft. Well, it is easier to do a deal like this now, though, to get a team to trade a first round pick. Sometimes it happens, and we have seen it happen, where teams will trade right before the draft. That was AJ Brown was right. That might have been draft day when A.J. Brown was traded, but most often where teams are the highest on themselves or feeling the pressure the most in their front office or in their coaching staff, it's usually around this time of year or around just after free agency where they're like, yeah, let's give up a first round draft pick to go get player X, Y, or Z. There's been a bunch of these trades in recent years. That's when teams are the most excited about their seasons and their teams, and they're feeling like this year is our year and everything else. That's when they're really more excited to do it. Teams are usually less excited to do it right before the draft because they put so much work into it. They have gotten super sold on, yes, if we pick this player will change our franchise. We got to keep our draft pick. So the ebbs and flows of the league impact it. But a next year's pick would be great for the Vikings. Yeah, it's going to hurt you in the short term. But once you arrive at that draft day, if you don't have any belief whatsoever, which I don't think the Vikings should be in this position, by the way. If you don't have any belief whatsoever that you can really compete for a Super Bowl, then yeah, trade people who are not nailed down. I think that there is a world where the Vikings are very good, and we are having that discussion about adding at the trade deadline rather than subtracting, rather than sending someone like Jordan Addison out. And you have to give O'Connell, if you're Nolan Teasley, O'Connell and Flores at least the opportunity to show you that they deserve to keep the roster together. But if they don't show you, then you can do whatever the heck you want if you're Nolan Teasley and try to get, next year's picks. BM, probably a stretch when it comes from, when you're talking about June 23rd and the league mouthpieces / NFL insiders. I don't know who is talking to Jason La Canfora, but the way that everything was sort of couched there seems like scuttlebutt was the right word. And that was the best I could do with this rumor is that, I don't want to completely dismiss it, but I do want to say that it sounded like there's something there, that there is truth to all rumors, as some would say, but it definitely didn't sound definitive in any way, which is, I guess, the NFL insider way in 2026. But is there enough there to put up a little article about, hey, maybe the Ravens could be, thinking about something like this because there's something behind it that teams believe that he could be available? I mean, you've already traded Jonathan Grenard. So if you're talking about this same sort of argument, it's the same reason they traded Jonathan Grenard. They had somebody behind him that they thought they wanted on the field more, Dallas Turner. They knew they could get draft capital, and they knew they could get future cap space. So if you've already done this once, I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world to bring up doing it again on the offensive side. And if you're Nolan Teasley, hey, if you're Kevin O'Connell, you're not going to be happy, but from Teasley's seat, he has to do what he wants to do to try to win a Super Bowl in the future if he doesn't believe it's going to be this year. I think you should give your coaches a chance with the best roster you can to start and then make your decisions from there. But if someone comes with a first, I don't know, man. That'd be hard to turn down. Up North says we have 3 NFL wide receivers. The rest are not up to par at all. Totally agree. Lopping off Jordan Addison from this team. This is why I wouldn't do it now, because lopping off Jordan Addison from this team does mean that you kind of are, I don't want to say wasting your time with Kyler Murray, but you're not giving Kyler Murray the full chance to show what he could do as the Vikings quarterback. That is another point too. And I'll throw in JJ McCarthy as well, is that both of those guys, they should get their full opportunity to compete in training camp, to potentially compete into the regular season, to see what's there long-term. If they don't have a number 2 wide receiver, and then Juwan Jennings, who plays very physically, only plays like 13 games or something, and you're talking about Ty Felton and Miles Price, or Ty Felton and Dylan Bell as your wide receivers, that's not really fair to your quarterbacks. That's not really giving your quarterbacks the full opportunity to be the best version of themselves, even if they do have Justin Jefferson. By the way, I'm curious. I'm going to look this up real quick. What Justin Jefferson's chances are of being Offensive Player of the Year? Because if they traded Jordan Addison, I think this would go up. So on FanDuel right now, Justin Jefferson is plus 1,800, which is actually tied with Jackson Smith-Njigba for Offensive Player of the Year odds on FanDuel. That would have to be better, I would assume, if they actually traded Jordan Addison. but I'm having trouble seeing that happening. Okay, back to your comments. All right. Dan says Ravens are one of the teams that doesn't make sense. They have Zay Flowers. Addison is fairly similar. Well, I think that it does a lot for the Ravens because think about, one, they need somebody who's cheap. Lamar Jackson is very, very expensive now on their cap and is going to only get more expensive. So they would need to trade for someone. They have spent a lot of money. They would need to trade for someone who's not that expensive. So that's one thing with Jordan Addison. And I agree with your assessment that they're similar, although Flowers is more of a yak guy. Addison is more contested catch, more separator. But size-wise, yeah, they'd be the small guys for sure. And as far as receivers go, though, I think you just get as many good ones as you possibly can. Lamar has never, as far as I can remember, had two wide receivers that you could actually say, this is a great duo. I don't think he's ever had that. I don't even know if I would say Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison would be a great duo. It would certainly be good, but it wouldn't be like as good as Jefferson and Addison. It would be at least a good duo. And the fact that, they have a short group of receivers already, and the tight ends are just okay there. What is Mark Andrews still there? Is that still happening? Is he still playing at this age? I mean, the Ravens are in a spot where they very badly need to win right now. So that's why they might be desperate enough to make a trade like this. And I think Addison would pair well with Zay Flowers, even if they are fairly similar. BM says Addison is a high-end number 2 who thinks he's a number 1. He's also a problem off the field, not egregiously, but enough not to have faith. If they could get a first, it would be a favor. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've said that I would do it for a first right now. I don't think that anyone's offering a first right now. Even as desperate as Baltimore might be, I think they would be much more in the line of like a second round draft pick for Jordan Addison is something you could probably get, which I don't hate as a trade if they're really willing to do it. But if you're going to have to try to convince them to go over that line, it probably would have to be a first round pick at this point. But your assessment is right. I don't know what Jordan Addison thinks of himself or the money he's supposed to get in the future or what his representation thinks of him or what he could get in the future. But if I'm them, I'm thinking, if I'm on Addison's side, I'm thinking have a big season this year and aim for $30 million a year next year. And oh yeah, by the way, make sure you keep your nose clean into the future as well. Christopher says, knowing what you know about Jefferson's character, if this season doesn't go well, especially a quarterback, what percentage chance would you give that Jefferson requests a trade? It's a great question, Chris. It's something that, we discuss on the golf course. I was golfing with a few of my comrades recently, and, we were talking about the same thing. Is like, where is Justin Jefferson at with this entire thing? Like, is he feeling like, hey, I want to be a Viking for life. I want to be Larry Fitzgerald, thick or thin, man, no matter what happens, like I'm in. Or is he much more along the lines of like, let's see what happens and then I'll decide, because his contract is set up for, let's see what happens and then I'll decide, because after this year, it becomes very expensive. The guarantees run out. And that's when you start to have the discussion. This is how Jonathan Grenard got traded. Grenard still had 2 years left on his deal, but his guarantees were out and they would have had to pay him a huge salary cap hit over the next 2 years unless they renegotiated the deal. The same thing is with Jefferson. This is why Burrow is a discussion, because that's how these mega contracts are set up. So if Jefferson decided after this year, you know what, I've had enough. You guys can't figure this thing out and I just want to go chase a ring, so I'm out. He can kind of do that. I mean, they would still be able to restructure his deal. That those are baked in where the front office can do it. Most of the time, the player doesn't have any say. So they can do a restructure to lower the cap hit a little bit, but not a ton, not like to where it's really reasonable. And then the next year after that, it might just be gone. So if you don't think you're competing for a Super Bowl and Jefferson is super frustrated and you have no answer at quarterback, that's how you get to the ends of the road. I'm sorry, I have to respond to a text. It's my friend Sage Rosenfels. I'm going to do a story about quarterback competitions, and I'm going to talk to Sage. So 1 second, everyone. I got to tell Sage that I'm live streaming. And this time, well, never mind. If you were live when I did the Kurt Warner story, you'll know what I'm referring to. There you go. Sage is a great friend, and I can't wait to talk to him for the story about what it's really like to be in a quarterback competition. Anyway, it's a great question, Chris, though, about Justin Jefferson. And I would not say that Justin Jefferson's character should be questioned if he gets to a position where he's saying it's time to trade me. Like, don't equate that with him having bad character. He's also a smart person who is a very, very, very competitive person that wants to wear a gold jacket someday. And what is going to enhance your legacy and your chances to get a gold jacket someday? Well, I would say that that's going to be winning a Super Bowl, right? Being in the playoffs. I mean, Justin Jefferson watching Jackson Smith-Njigba sort of take the crown and put it on and dance around with it. I mean, you know he doesn't like that. You know that Justin Jefferson is spending every day this offseason thinking about nothing else than how are people saying Jackson Smith-Njigba is better than me. I don't know how many people are, but, Smith-Njigba getting that title of Offensive Player of the Year at wide receiver, Super Bowl champion. I mean, geez, right? Like, those are the things that Justin Jefferson dreams of. And if you're talking about, well, yeah, we're going to draft a quarterback at 18th overall and give it another go, I don't know. And then you're probably talking about at least 2 first rounders and 2 second rounders for Jefferson. What did Tyreek Hill go for? Is it somewhere in that range? Maybe 3 first rounders for Justin Jefferson. You have to think about it. And that would be terrible for the franchise to lose him. I mean, the same way with like Giannis Antetokounmpo or, these players that everyone buys their jersey and loves so much and everything else. I mean, it's awful for the fan base to lose players that you love that much and have done so much for your franchise. At the same time, if you could get 2 first rounders, 2 seconds back, and Jefferson's really not on your timeline and not on the same page and isn't going to stay and has already told you, I'm not going to sign another contract here, you have no choice. That's how it ends up happening, is you basically get backed into a corner where you have no choice. And that could happen to the Vikings after this year. That's probably one of the reasons to not trade Jordan Addison is this guy wants to win. He wants to compete for a Super Bowl. He doesn't want to just get 1,000 yards. Up North says Jefferson will want out soon if the quarterback isn't enough to feed him. I don't think it's just feeding him, though. I really don't think. I mean, having been around Justin since 2020, the first thing that I noticed about Justin Jefferson was, of course, his personality is very happy-go-lucky and so forth. But the first thing I noticed about is how competitive he was. In practice, when we spoke with him, like he sets an extremely high standard for himself. And I don't think that he wants to be on teams that can't win in the playoffs, can't even get to the playoffs a lot of these years, can't find the franchise quarterback. And he's the one that's sort of propping up, the team a lot of the years with, Kirk Cousins. It's like, this isn't what he believes that he should be doing. He believes that he should be playing in the playoffs. Devontae Adams is a guy that he absolutely worships. There he is playing in the NFC Championship. It's like, that's where he belongs. And I think that will be just as much of a driving factor. Like if you told Justin Jefferson, hey, you're only going to get 1,100 yards, but your team's going to go to the NFC Championship, or you're going to get 1,800 yards and you're going to be, I don't know, playing golf in Cabo in January, he would take the 1,200 yards or 1,100 yards to be in the Super Bowl. At this point in his career, 100%. So I think that's what he wants the most here. Succeed as a team, and yes, get his numbers back up where they are, but succeed as a team. Because they really, to have Justin Jefferson for this long and no playoff wins is honestly a travesty. Like to have a player who has more yards by this age than anyone else in NFL history and have no playoff wins is pretty brutal. That's got to happen. Purple Purgatory, a 2027 first, 2028 third, and a 7th, and the Ravens get a 5th back. You've really calculated that out. If it's a 2027 first and a 2028 third, yeah, there's no question about it. I would do it just for the first. Johnny says Addison will go the way of Percy Harvin. I doubt that the Vikings will make a long-term commitment to him. Question is when he'll be traded, not if. See, I didn't know that so many of you felt like this was kind of a foregone conclusion. See, I had thought of it as really up in the air. Like, I don't know where it's going to go, and it's going to be decided by this season. That's how I was approaching this issue. But now that we've had this conversation, it's fascinating to me that so many of you are kind of looking at this and going, no, this is probably going to happen with Jordan Addison. But, if they start to get the sense after this year that Justin Jefferson wants out, then maybe you pivot a little bit. I don't know if you want to pivot to Jordan Addison being your number one wide receiver from Jefferson, but you might have to, depending on the circumstances. Let's see. BM says, this is a strange season. I actually think the Vikings will make a deep playoff run. And at the same time, I'm fine if they sell off higher end pieces if they get a good offer. It is a strange place to be. And I think that has a lot to do with, in order to go to the NFC Championship, in order to have a great season, there's this list of things that has to happen that can absolutely happen. But is it that likely to happen? So Kyler Murray or JJ McCarthy has to be really good. And the young defensive players on the D-line have to step up right away. And you've got to be mostly fine without Harrison Smith, it seems. And you've got to put together a running game that's well above average with two running backs who produced a average running game last season. And they've got to stay healthy. And maybe you've got to have young players step up and shine. And you've got to have an offensive line stay healthy. And you've got to have like KOC convert a 3rd and 2 every once in a while. Like, there's a lot of things that have to go down. And you also have to conquer an NFC North that's extremely good. So there's a lot of things that have to happen for this team to be where you're saying that they should be, which is having a deep playoff run. And I think with these coaches, and I think with this group of players and the leadership and the locker room and the past production, that we can add it up and say, man, they should be right there. There's no excuse for not being right there. At the same time, if you told me that, hey, a couple offensive linemen got hurt, hey, Kyler Murray just never really fit with KOC in the offense, hey, Caleb Banks wasn't ready, Dominique Orange couldn't take on 500 to 700 snaps right away, wasn't ready, and Theo Jackson couldn't hold it down, and maybe a corner got hurt, and all of a sudden you're playing rookies, I wouldn't be that shocked. I wouldn't be. And then because if you have any shortcomings, you'll get trampled in the NFC North because they're so good. So I think that's what makes it strange, is that you can absolutely see it and you can absolutely check all those boxes, but none of us would be totally stunned. And the other thing is too, there's also generally the malaise of Vikings fans with kind of going through this same thing again. You've been here many times. Hey, that quarterback who you thought was going to be the quarterback? Well, it's actually somebody else's quarterback, and now we're hoping and dreaming. Like, Vikings fans have been through that a lot, and I think what Nolan Teasley represents is a potential shift toward really focusing on building that Super Bowl caliber roster again. The last time they really did it, that they truly built from a foundation all the way up to a roster that could compete for a Super Bowl, was dating back to when Mike Zimmer first got here. And Rick and Mike spent a ton of draft capital. Rick kind of went a little berserk on that 2013 draft class, got Xavier Rhodes out of it, Cordero Patterson, whom they should have used more, obviously, but they got a lot out of that. And then the 2014 draft, they get a quarterback, they get Anthony Barr, key piece, and they then in 2015 have the draft of the century and get all those star players, but they really did it methodically to build that team up. And then they found some guys along the way, like Adam Thielen, the undrafted free agent. Eventually Anthony Harris shows up. Anderson Dejo was the original UFL player. So, I mean, that type of build took years. It really began in probably 2012 with the drafting of Harrison Smith. And then it culminates 5 years later. Well, if I told Vikings fans, hey, you know what? You're going to do some things right now that are not going to feel great, for the idea that over the next couple years, you will have a chance to legitimately build a Super Bowl caliber roster. So you're not the one looking at what can we learn from the Seahawks? Instead, you look like the Seahawks. I think everybody would sign up for that. And if part of that is moving on from guys who have been a big part of these last couple years, well, then so be it. Because cap space, flexibility, draft capital, these things are worth their weight in gold in the NFL. And JG says Teasley will absolutely trade Addison, assuming the price is right. They are not going to pay him, and good wide receivers are not as difficult to find. That I do disagree with. This is a team with a history of great drafting at wide receiver. Well, yeah, I mean, there's always some guys that didn't turn out to be great, like Troy Williamson and Laquan Treadwell, but they're not hard to find in the draft. I agree. Or at least there's a lot of receivers coming out every year that are interesting in the draft that could work out as a number 2. They are very difficult to find anywhere else. Free agency, almost impossible. Trade, obviously you have to give up a lot. So it would force you into a position to use a top 100 pick on a wide receiver. But the crazy thing is, when I researched this, I thought, gosh, the 3rd round is a place to draft a wide receiver. I mean, there's been a lot of success stories. Cooper Kupp is one of them that comes to mind. Terry McLaurin is another one. St. Brown, I think, was a 4th rounder, but like that range of the draft, there's a lot of good wide receivers, and you have a lot better chance of success if you are playing with Justin Jefferson. So if you're going to sign Jefferson to a huge extension, then it becomes very challenging to sign Addison. So I could see that. I'm just a little surprised by the amount of confidence that everyone has. And I also think that Addison is just, he's never really ingratiated himself. I mean, the off-field stuff, but then kind of the inconsistency on the field. I don't know if it's ever really like made him a player that fans adore and never want to see gone. And when your team hasn't won anything and they haven't won in the playoffs, then it's usually like, okay, well, whatever. I'm never for moving out the good players. Addison is still very young. You can afford it potentially if you really need to. That's why I would put it back kind of on him. Like, this is a prove it year for you. Shadow Wolf, if they were to trade him, it should be to the Jaguars for Brian Thomas Jr., who appears to be, they appear to be out on him. Both wide receivers could use a fresh start, and the Jaguars OC Grant Udinski was here before. I don't know how high I am on Brian Thomas because, you know, there's a thing about box score and fantasy stats that, you know, they were playing so badly, the Jaguars, in 2024, that I think he got pumped a bunch of targets by Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence because he was the only guy out there and you got to throw to somebody. And then when the pressure was really on, he didn't perform anywhere near that. But I understand what you're saying. I would prefer draft capital, though. Much prefer draft capital, because if someone's trading a wide receiver who's had a big year before, they are doing it for a reason. So to me, it would be, if they want to give you a 1st round pick, then yes. But if not, what you'd be looking for is exactly a team like Baltimore or Jacksonville, though. Somebody who thinks this year is our year, we can win the Super Bowl. Who cares about our 1st round draft pick? And what you hope for is that it turns out to be like Atlanta trading for James Pierce in the draft and then kind of falling apart and giving you a high draft pick. Tristan, what might we trade Addison for? I mean, realistically, if you get to the trade deadline, you're probably asking for a 2nd and settling for a 3rd, because how this formula usually works is the teams are going to look at what you would get for a comp pick. And that's a 3rd rounder for Addison is pretty likely, maybe a 4th rounder, but I'd guess a 3rd rounder for Addison is pretty likely. So that's where the bar is. You want to at least clear that. So you're aiming for a 2nd. And if there's a desperate enough team, I think they would do it. But the worst, if he said, no way am I resigning here, and he's been kind of a problem, and something else happens off the field, then probably you're looking at more of a 3rd. It really depends on how he's playing. Shadow Wolf, next year's wide receiver class is insanely deep. The Vikings should definitely get one by round 3 at least, and hopefully a 2nd one before the end of the draft. This is the thing, right? Is that these wide receiver classes that have come out the last few years, they are deep. And this year I thought was pretty deep at wide receiver, and it wasn't even considered to be a great class. It was like a lot of B wide receivers. I think the fact that they didn't spend a draft pick on a wide receiver may have indicated to me that they would prefer that Addison stays, but it's a moving target. That's why it coming up right now is so interesting, because it's what it's really asking you to do, this rumor. And how about this? Like, what a rumor that we've been given to break down in so many ways. But it's really asking you a lot more questions. And that's why when I saw it, I was like, okay, there's nothing really of super substance in this report, but I didn't even realize like there was this opening of, oh, wait, like there's a lot more to say about this with Jordan Addison, because what it really asks you to do is to figure out in your mind, what do I really think of this team? What do I really think of their chances? What do I really think of Jordan Addison having a great season and them sticking with him long-term and them being a contender with him? Because when you really get down to it, that's what dictates whether you would do this or not. If you truly in your heart and soul don't think that this team has much of a real chance to compete for the Super Bowl, then you're saying, you know what? It's okay. Like it's all right. Give future draft capital, let Nolan Teasley take the wheel and let's see what happens. But if you're holding out, like, wait a minute, let's see what happens, like that you could hedge that way. Or if you're saying, no way, like last night there was a commenter who was thinking they're going to win 15 games. So if you're that guy, you're like, no way. So it really asks you, like, what do I truly think about this team is whether you would do this and their possibilities to win long-term, what they're going to do at quarterback, what their flexibility is going to be. That's why I like it. And obviously you guys have liked it too. You know, there was a few of you cynics. Oh, your June rumor, but look at you guys. You're having a fun discussion about football in June. Good stuff. Son of Beavers, Baltimore might offer a first, but then pull out of the deal anyway. Yeah, that's right. They've still got that first for next year because they didn't do the Max Crosby trade. Skull Shadow says, I found it interesting that Teasley immediately picked up 2 wide receivers he's familiar with in Seattle, maybe trying to get one to make a trade more viable. Could be. I also think that like the guys that he picked up are like deep roster guys who, you know, maybe they have an eye on for a practice squad. That's probably more likely it. But the one thing that we can say for sure is that you never really know when someone's going to emerge, and that could change the calculus. If you're in the middle of camp and at some point this has happened, right? Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, these guys at some point were the original Mr. Mankato's. Somebody's turning a corner. Somebody's making noise. This is how Harrison Phillips got traded last year. And while I don't think that was actually a good trade, that is how he got traded. Was they looked at Jalen Redmond during training camp and went, oh my God, like this guy's actually awesome. And Levi Drake was playing really well. And they're going, dude, what is like, where are we even going to play Harrison Phillips? Because we have so much young talent. Now they needed him against the run early in the season. I don't know if that gets him one more win. Maybe it does. Probably not. So maybe it was actually a fine trade because it wouldn't have made the difference between 9-8 and 10-7, and they weren't winning the Super Bowl probably. So maybe it is a fine trade. And that is like, as we have this conversation about like moving on from Jonathan Grenard, was this kind of, well, you know, everyone would like Jonathan Grenard on their football team, but if you look at it as much more, you got to think long-term about your franchise, then, you know, you're pretty okay with moving on from Jonathan Grenard. But you never know when someone is just going to arrive on the spot and they become super high on a certain wide receiver. And then that guy's in the game and he's playing. You're going, what? When did that happen? I mean, that's a little bit of Jalen Naylor. Like for years, KOC was saying, I really love this guy, Jalen Naylor. And then we were like, okay, I guess. And then suddenly he was good. And KJ Osborne, the same sort of thing. So you never really know. I mean, I don't think Dylan Bell could inspire them that much with a mini camp, but you never really know as you go along that could happen. Shadow Wolf says Addison was on pace to break Randy Moss's rookie TD record before Cousins got hurt. Even with Jefferson missing half the games, Kirk was on an MVP pace. A major what if. MVP is a little bit aggressive for that, but I wouldn't say he was on an MVP pace. He was playing really well, but they were like 4-4. When it comes to that year, though, Addison, you're right, in 2023 showed instantly why they drafted him. He looked like a star receiver right out of the box. And in 2024, he was very good. But then you get the suspension, then you get the poor performance, and things change so fast in the NFL. Like you can have, this is why Justin Jefferson is so incredible, is that you can have great starts to your career, but it doesn't always last and it doesn't always guarantee. And then you go back and look and you go, what the heck happened there? And who knows, right? And so if that is what happens this year with Jordan Addison, then it might be the end. Two Guns says they literally just picked up the 5th-year option. Trading Addison is not going to happen. I know you guys have to talk about the team, but if anyone's getting traded, it's McCarthy. Well, that's, Two Guns. why I said it's not likely, but the 5th-year option doesn't really have a lot to do with whether they would trade him or not. Whether they would trade him or not would depend on a few things. Like, number one, whether they believe that they can sign him to an extension long-term after this season, or even like they did the Darisaw deal at this time of year last year. Like they did it during the summer after his 3rd season in the NFL. They signed Darisaw. So you can do an extension with a player right now. But if Jordan Addison was saying, no way, no how, I'm going to stay here. But also, if you want to extend the player, it's going to cost a lot of money, more likely than not. And if you can't really trust him off the field and you don't think that you want this duo that's making a huge percentage of the cap, then when is his trade value going to be at its highest? It would be right now. His trade value going into his 5th-year option year would not be quite as high because he didn't have team control. Like, team control is going to matter quite a bit. And if Kwesi was the GM, I don't think we would be having as much of a discussion either, but there's a new GM here. So I think it's a worthwhile discussion, even if I think that it's more likely that it would happen at a different time. So that opinion is totally fair. I don't think it's going to happen either, but it does ask you to answer the question of, would you do it also? Like, would you just move on right now from Jordan Addison, knowing that there's a big payday down the road, knowing that, his performance has not been what you wanted, knowing that there's issues with him off the field? Like, would you do it right now and just say, you know what? Like, we're going to think about the future just as much? Because with Jonathan Grenard, I didn't think Grenard was getting traded going into the offseason because, hey, he's got 2 years left on his contract. They'll probably just play it out. And then they decided to think long-term rather than short-term. So Addison might be like, are you thinking long-term? Steven said Addison is still young. Is he a compatible player for the Vikings? Will he be a productive player this season? Compatible really depends on him. I mean, he has been with the locker room, with his teammates. As far as I've ever heard, productive is what will dictate this to some extent. And really the question is, do you think that you can replace that production? Do you think that you can have somebody else produce at the same sort of level, right? Do you think that you could have somebody else that you draft or that you sign in free agency and then like they end up being just as good as Jordan Addison for a lot less money? Like, there's a lot of calculus that goes into it. BM, every aspect of Addison on the field and off the field makes you appreciate Justin Jefferson even more. Well, I mean, Addison is very good on the field, right? But yeah, I mean, someone who is decidedly better than a guy who's a first rounder who can make, go up and get it catches and all that sort of stuff, for sure. I mean, Jefferson is the one that you want here for life. You would never move on from as long as you can avoid it. And I think that's a reason why you wouldn't want to move on from Jordan Addison right now, is because you need to give Jefferson every opportunity to get in the playoffs and win. BM says JA isn't worth the salary the market will pay him. If they could get a first, they should. If not, ride with him and pray that he doesn't do another stupid thing away from the field. Let's see. Christian Watson is also mid. Yeah. Christian Watson is also banged up a lot, but I think it is comparable. Percy Harvin got a first and 2/3. Okay. I mean, Percy Harvin was a more talented player than Jordan Addison, more problematic, but definitely a better football player. Jay Hayes says, trade him, shift over to consistent 12 personnel, better for the run game. That they could do that. They could do that and have Jefferson and Jennings on the field, develop the other wide receivers, play a lot of Josh Oliver, play a lot of Max Bredesen, run the ball better. You can do that, but is that really what we think Kevin O'Connell's going to do? I don't think so. I think that O'Connell would jump in front of a train for Jordan Addison. That's at least the way that it's always felt. He's been very defensive about Jordan Addison and his issues off the field, but that's why Nolan Teasley being here matters a lot to this equation. Mama, if we trade him now, he will be a 1,500-yard receiver for somebody else. Well, that's not really what your concern would be, though, right? Like, your concern is for the future, what would he do for you at what price? That's really the thought process. I'm not down on Christian Watson, by the way. 1st and a 5th for A.J. Brown. Yeah. Jefferson definitely would get 2 firsts, probably more. I think he would get I think he would get more than that. Up North says we didn't get 2 firsts for Randy. Well, that was a different situation. Randy Moss had totally run out his time with Minnesota. He was considered at the time like very problematic, very risky. That's not how it's going to be viewed with Jefferson. So it would be different. Napoleon Harris was a good Viking. JG, I could see KC, Kansas City being interested given the issue with Rice. That's the other point is that like there's enough teams that are in desperation mode to win that you might be able to get somebody to give you the first round pick we're talking about. And then that's where, when the word scuttlebutt comes about, you're like, well, are people talking about this? Is this something that's being discussed? So those of you cynical about this being a June rumor have spent, a lot of time talking about it because it's got a lot of good angles. Yeah, Dan, that touchdown drop against the Giants was really tough. I mean, the Chicago one was tough. Just did not play very well. 1216 Vivek says if the season starts going sideways, they should try to trade Addison before the trade deadline for draft picks. We'll need a lot of draft capital if we want to draft a quarterback. That is something that is really worth thinking about as well. That if you remember what the Vikings did right before they drafted JJ McCarthy, they traded up to get a second first round draft pick. And the reason they did that, which turned into Dallas Turner, the reason that they did that was because they were thinking that they might have a chance to trade up to get Drake May, to trade another first round pick. Or even if the top 3 went, they thought, well, there might be teams that try to jump up and they need to be able to make the highest offer. So that is a good point that let's say that you trade Jordan Addison and even get a second round draft pick and you need to move from number 18 to number 10 to get a quarterback next year. You might need that second round draft pick in order to do it. Shadow Wolf, the NFL desperately needs to move the trade deadline back. Well, they moved it back quite a bit. What is it? Is it week 9 now? Is that how far it is now? Because I thought last year they moved it back even more. But yeah, they could do it to what is it? Hockey's is really late. I guess they could do it to week 10, but you'd really be renting players at that point. You're right though. I mean, I'm in favor of a trade deadline being pushed back as far as possible because that opens the door to more star players whose contracts are running out being traded. A more active deadline is more interesting for the league, even if it's not always the best. But then teams have really settled. When they used to have it in week 6, teams didn't know who they were. If you were, 2-4, like, okay, well, whatever, we could still get back in the race. But now I think it's week 9 now, isn't it? That, you're 5-4 or something like, you might, or you're 4-5, you might have already decided we can't get there, or you're 3-6, we can't get there. So we could, make a trade. Moving it back even more would be even more definitive that certain teams weren't making the playoffs. And that's really what happens in hockey and baseball is it's like, yeah, we're out. So we're just going to trade our players. It would increase the amount of movement. Dan says, I'm glad we have good receivers now, not the horrible ones we had in the early 2010s. Love me some Bobby Wade, but as a number 1. Yeah. It has not always been like this. Shadow Wolf, Charles Johnson being our number 1 wide receiver was dark times. This is Sane Grimes says, and if I'm ever pronouncing your name wrong, please tell me. Nolan has to be smart enough to know that Kyler Murray is past his prime days and he needs to solidify a franchise quarterback quickly. All trades should be working toward collateral for a new quarterback. Well, I think that if you're Nolan Teasley, you come in with a clear impression of Kyler Murray. And there's a lot of people around the league that don't love Kyler Murray from the scouting world. And I talked to a former NFL scout about Kyler Murray. Maybe I'll do a story about that at some point. And, I talked to a former scout about Kyler Murray, just a couple of texts back and forth. And what I got back was the height thing is really hard to get over. Because, there are throws that get missed out there and scrambling quarterbacks are not always loved by scouts. This is how Mahomes doesn't go number 1 overall. Scouts are always nervous about scrambling quarterbacks because it's inconsistent. It can be wild. It can be out of control. So if Nolan Teasley feels the same way, if he feels like the inconsistency of Kyler Murray is just too difficult to bet on, then I would agree with you that anyone you give away that brings back capital that you could get the quarterback you like is totally worth giving it up because you could get more receivers down the road. You can't just run yourself into quarterbacks. Shadow still annoyed Zimmer didn't let Rick take Parker, giving Teddy his number one wide receiver in college. Oh, was that Devontae Parker? Is that who we're talking about? Was he with Miami? Is that who we're talking about? Steven, do an impromptu, bring in Sage. Yeah, Sage will do another. Yeah, he'll do another pod with us sometime. He's enjoying his summer. I bothered him to do this story, but he'll jump in eventually for sure. He'll be back. Sage has been kind of out of the media limelight. We used to do a lot of radio together, and we talk all the time about football, but sometimes I'm like, dude, we should be podding this. We should be doing this for an audience. Skull Shadow, we've had Jefferson for 6 years. Time to move him and get some draft capital. I am not there. I am not there with Justin Jefferson. I would much prefer Justin Jefferson to be Larry Fitzgerald, and you'll get your chances when they come. Like, it's not going to always happen unless you draft the next Josh Allen or something. But like, Larry Fitzgerald got to a Super Bowl, was this close to winning one, had other good seasons with like Carson Palmer. I would want it to be through thick and thin. I would not want, like, we need to care about something in sports. Like, there's so much nihilism in sports. Like, we talk about the gambling issues sometimes and things like that. And sometimes it feels like a lot of fans, well, we are supported here on the show by FanDuel, and I love using their information and everything else. But what I don't always love is when fans care more about their bets than they do about their teams and their sports. Like, I don't love that. And I definitely don't love when we get into front office mode and we stop caring about any player ever, and we just only look at them as assets and economics and everything else. Like, whoa. Let's not strip the soul from this thing. Like, Justin Jefferson being a Minnesota Viking, like Tim Brown was for the Raiders for like 15 years, is really the goal here. That's what you're really looking for, is this guy's a Viking for life. That's what you want for Justin Jefferson. You don't want to just send him off for draft picks. You can replace Jordan Addison. I believe in that. I don't think you can replace Justin Jefferson. That's not somebody that you just go out. You can replace, just for example, like Jonathan Grenard. You can replace Jonathan Grenard. You cannot replace Justin Jefferson. He's just too unique. Flick says, I think we trade Jefferson if we don't win. I would hate that so much. It would kill me. Yeah, I know. That's what I mean. It's like, if he got to that part of his career where he just decided, like, I just can't sign another extension with this franchise, they're not getting it done, it would be devastating. You trade Julius Randle, okay. Even when they traded Karl Anthony Towns, it was pretty tough, but I think everyone understood, and I feel great for Karl that he won a championship, but everyone understood. I think it would be very hard to understand with Justin Jefferson. It would be like, oh, come on. Like, another one of these great players going, but he is a level of greatness that only stands up with the best ever. Like, it would be almost like losing KG, I think. I don't know if it's worse, but it would be up there. Son of Beavers, I saw that story about Matt Miller. Just horrible. I hope he's okay. But that's a nightmare. Flick, selfishly, I hope Teasley does this. It would be really tough for the franchise, but we've seen what happens when we don't have the quarterback. And Skull Shadow says Teasley's a cold-blooded GM. We're about to see an overhaul where nobody is off limits. Let him cook. I do like that. And Flick says, down for that, tired of the status quo. They really did this in 2023, and they rebuilt it very quickly. And this is what you're always having to do in the NFL. But I think if you go kicking and screaming, it can always be difficult. Now, if you look at the other side of that, a 24 now, 24, 25-year-old wide receiver who is just really coming into his prime, if he were to play really well this year, then the tune would be shifted. And if they throw the ball well enough for Addison and Jefferson both have great years, then you're looking at playing in the playoffs, wanting Addison long-term. Like, I think a lot of you seem to have decided this is a good idea. You need to move him out. And the whole, throw out the baby with the bathwater thing, like, it does exist when it comes to stuff like this, where it's like, well, let's not be throwing out everybody just because you want ruthless general managing and overhauling and so forth. But rosters quickly, and I had this conversation with Bob Sturm, who's great, covers Dallas, and is in sports radio there. But we were talking about how rosters basically overhaul every 3 years. So 2023 to 2026 to 2029, like this is kind of how it goes. And you can't keep everybody as you go through. Like there's only a handful of players that will sustain through those overhauls every 3 years. So they've kind of gotten to the point where it's time for another one, but who's going to stay? I don't want to throw out players who are 24, 25 years old if I don't have to. Even if it gets expensive, you would prefer to have a great wide receiver duo, even if it costs you. There shouldn't be a price tag that is so restricting that you just couldn't do anything if you're going to build a lot through the draft. What it might come down to, though, is if you pay a quarterback, then you probably can't afford to do that. I mean, even with Patrick Mahomes, like it was over there with Tyreek Hill, but they paid Mahomes. They moved on from Tyreek Hill because eventually just the math didn't add up. How are you going to pay him that much? And the amount of draft capital that the Dolphins were willing to give up, and Kansas City came out on top with that. Kit says, I think the assumption they'll trade Jefferson or Addison is rooted in seeing what we've seen from them trade away Diggs, Harvin, and Moss. Oh, sure. Yeah. Oh, sure. But the people who want to trade away, like, Taleg there wants to trade away Justin Jefferson. To me, if you want to trade away Justin Jefferson, you got to look yourself in the mirror. Like, yeah, you can make an argument for me of like, hey, what if they won with Justin Jefferson and they could use those 2 first-round draft picks? And hey, maybe one of those first-round draft picks will be a great wide receiver. The Family Guy, what's in the box? I hope it's another box. I get it. I get where every one of us has become like a Madden player, make any trade. We're all general managers and so forth. This guy is so important to the soul of the Minnesota Vikings, has been such an incredible player, and is in his prime, by the way. Not for me, I'm not trading any megastar in his prime if I don't have to. Those are the guys that drive Super Bowls, is megastars in their prime drive you to the Super Bowl. Not, hey, you could just throw anybody out there. I don't think that's the case. Jay says, I think we have a better roster this year than last year. What are your thoughts? From player number 2 to 53, I don't think so. I actually don't think so. Because even though Javon Hargrave and Jonathan Allen and Jonathan Grenard underperformed expectations last year, those are good players. And they weren't great players, but they were enough to create pressure. They played a ton of snaps. I mean, we have to consider that, like snap counts. Jonathan Grenard still played a lot of snaps, even though he got banged up, and he was playing 60 a game, 50, 60 a game. And Hargrave and Allen both stayed healthy pretty much the entire year. That's a ton of snaps there too. And we have to remember Harrison Smith played great last year and he was on the roster. It's a big drop off to anybody. I think that their depth at corner's a little better. Their depth at linebacker might be a little bit better, because they have Jake Golday. Then offensive line healthy. It's essentially the same offensive line, but healthy makes a difference. But roster-wise, it's not different from the offensive line. If Ryan Kelly was healthy, that's a better offensive line when healthy. Running back room is the same. Wide receiver room is the same. I don't think it's a better roster, no. If Caleb Banks is amazing right away, then yes. If Dominique Orange is amazing right away, then yes. If they can make up for the loss of Harrison Smith, then it's possible, but I don't think it's quite as good. No, I think that really making up the difference is the quarterback position. That's what it really comes down to. Flick says we have 3 rookies starting, lost a ton of veterans, including Smith, lost Grenard. How are we better? Yeah, I agree with you. Ryder says, how often did Seattle grab players off waivers when Teasley is there? Ryder, I've never looked into this. A lot of their players, though, I don't know how many long shots they have. I don't know how often they took swings at, oh, this guy was a first round draft pick, so we're bringing them in. I don't think of them as a team that really did that. They really drafted and developed this entire Super Bowl team twice. That's how they did it. I mean, the players that they brought in for veterans were usually like a DeMarcus Lawrence, who is still enough in his prime to make a difference. But when you think about that whole roster, I mean, there's just not that many players that they went into free agency. They made the one big trade to get Leonard Williams. Amazing trade for them. That's an absolute star. But everybody else pretty much came through the draft. There wasn't, they made the trade for Ernest Jones. There wasn't a ton of that, like, oh, we're just going to grab this guy and off the waiver wire. I don't think there was a lot of that. But, maybe when it comes to training camp, I don't know what they did right before the season. Maybe there were little additions right before the season. And I'm sure when a new GM comes in, he's got ideas. He's got guys that he's scouted, that he likes, that he's interested, that he wants to bring in. Teleg says our 2 rookie DTs are better than we had before. We can't know that. We really can't. I mean, Hargrave and Allen do deserve some credit for playing pretty darn well down the stretch. I think they struggled early in the season, but they did play well down the stretch. We don't know what Caleb Banks is going to bring. He did not produce at a super high level at Florida. And, Dominique Orange was pretty good at Iowa State, but he's a different player. So where are those pressures coming from? And I agree, Flick, it's based on a lot of hope. Yes, you hope that they're better. And I think that long-term, they will be better than what Hargrave and Allen were last year long-term. But this year, it's a transition, man. Shadow Wolf, go watch Brian Thomas Jr. highlights with Daniels at LSU. He would absolutely feast here. I don't doubt it, but there was something about an injury that he brought up in Jacksonville. I'm not saying, he's a high draft pick. I'm not saying he was entirely a product of them being a bad team, but if I'm trading for something, I want draft capital. I don't want somebody else's receiver coming off a down year. I would be looking for a guy that I can draft in the first round and then have on a rookie contract for 4 years. So, yeah, I think, but when you say, Dan, you say he's great, but he had a bum shoulder last year, that's the point though, isn't it? If he was hurt last year and then is he 100% now? I saw some comment by him of I'm learning to play through the stuff that's happened. I don't love that. Comet, who talks trading for Addison fans and a guy on Twitter with nothing real to report during a dead season. Well, see, it's, what's great about it is it's not just a guy on Twitter. Jason La Canfora has been an NFL insider and he's been on Fox television and stuff in the Washington Post. So I think Jason La Canfora is a little more than a guy on Twitter. But when you're talking about this, it has just opened up a lot of great thoughts about where this team is going and where they are now, what your belief is. And that's what I've enjoyed about the conversation. So yeah, when you talk about would they prefer to extend him because he's great? Yes, they would. Would they prefer that he has a great year and everything goes swimmingly and they love this season and Kyler's doing great and they are, 6-2 at the trade deadline and they're adding not so, yes, in the rosy view. Oh yeah, then Addison's here long-term and it all works out wonderfully, but that's not the only outcome. So talking about the other ones are interesting. Yeah, I think it was an ankle injury. I think you're right for Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, sorry, Beavers. Tuesday is usually not a night that I go live, but middle of summer, sometimes schedules are different. Didn't have a guest today, had one yesterday. And then Thursday, I'm not going to be available to go live. So I thought, well, I promised 3 times a week. That was the promise. That was the Purple Insider promise. So here we are. Wanted to make sure we did it 3 times a week. Yeah, Skull Shadow, if Addison is looking for $30 to $35 million a year, no way the Vikings come close to that. He did say, let's get paid. Yes. Dan says, that Addison stood up for McCarthy on social media. I didn't see what happened there, but no one has ever said to me, gosh, this guy, can't wait to get him out of the locker room. No one's ever said that. Shadow Wolf, thanks for stopping by. Really appreciate that. Thanks for taking the time. Dan's mowing his lawn. I have one of those electric lawn mowers and they're much quieter and I enjoy it. So maybe you can hear the podcast. Maybe you have an electric lawnmower and you can hear the podcast better. Axton says, did we already talk about the practice schedule release yet? Can't believe that the Vikings are starting mandatory practices so late after canceling the last week of voluntary OTAs. I was a little surprised by that too. I talked about the ones that were open to fans and some key dates, but I didn't talk about the fact that they're starting a week later than everyone else. I don't know why that is. I truly don't. But I don't think it affects the number of practices. Maybe the training camp practices will go a little bit later. I honestly don't know. I'll have to ask somebody what that is. Sometimes people from the Vikings are watching and they will text me things. So if you're watching out there, Vikings people, text me why they're starting training camp late. I haven't asked anyone. I was thinking about golf dates. You know what? We could get another couple golf dates right before training camp. But it is interesting. Usually I think it starts the 23rd. Chris says it's a bad idea to trade Addison, keep him and JJ starts at quarterback, give him a chance with a good, healthy O-line. JJ gets all the blame. Yeah, no, he doesn't. But other quarterbacks have had things go wrong and performed at a pretty good level, and that wasn't even close to an acceptable level. So JJ at this moment has to prove a ton in order to be the starting quarterback. But if your argument is that, and this is a fair argument, I'll help you, Chris, that JJ McCarthy could still win this job and be cheap going forward, at least for another year, or the way you could work out an extension for a couple years. So you could actually afford an extension for Jordan Addison, and maybe someday down the road, you'd have to deal with the implications of that. But at least for 2027, if JJ McCarthy was good, the point that you're accidentally making is that so much hinges on just what happens next to whether you would move Addison or not. Who's playing quarterback? How well do they play? Does it look like there's a future quarterback here on the roster right now or not? All that stuff has a trickle-down effect to Jordan Addison, which is a good point. And I'll give you 60% of the credit. Davis says, I think that from a process standpoint, it's defensible to consider trading Addison, but I wonder how much of the human side, a new front office rolling in and trading a core player factors in. I mean, from the locker room angle, like those guys, you got to play regardless, right? If they trade Jordan Addison, it's only business and whatever. But I do think there's something to what you're saying, that a trade now, and this is why I just can't see it in the offseason, a trade now would send the total opposite signal of what they sent during the whole offseason. They brought back TJ Hawkinson when they could have moved on. They brought back Aaron Jones when they could have moved on. They just signed Jawan Jennings to give a number 3 wide receiver to bolster your situation, to provide each quarterback with every opportunity to go compete for the playoffs. And Kevin O'Connell is sitting here needing a playoff win, needing an 11-win season, needing to get into the postseason and prove he can win. And you're going to trade one of their better players on the team? Like, that just doesn't really add up, which is why I was saying I just don't think that there's very much chance, unless there's some issue behind the scenes we don't know about, of doing it right now. But all of that stuff that we just laid out could shift very quickly. And, you know, Nolan Teasley cannot do the same thing that Rick Spielman did. And actually, he's in a position to be able to be as bold as he wants to be. It's kind of like how Kwesi was bold in moving away from Dalvin Cook and moving away from Adam Thielen after 2022. They had such a great season, and they said, all right, out with the old, in with the new. That was bold at the time. We praised it a lot because we said, this is what you do. This is what the analytics GM would do. And then as we went along, it became much more right back to what all the GMs do when the pressure is on and you need to win now and so forth, and you're making your big bet on your quarterback. Then you start making moves that are not the most efficient and ideal. So right now, at the beginning of Nolan Teasley, like, this is the most bold he can be. This is the most different he can be. Because once you get past the early stages, then there's expectations, there's pressure, there's hot seats and all that sort of stuff that comes along with it if you don't win a Super Bowl. So now is the time to, take down parts of this if you want to. But I think what they did in the offseason was all set up to potentially win this year, and Teasley should give them every opportunity to do so. Axton says, if the quarterback situation does not resolve itself this year or next year, do you think Teasley will push all the chips in to trade for Burrow? I do think that any general manager would do this, would trade for Joe Burrow. 3 firsts, whatever it takes. I mean, it's Joe Burrow. Like, this is one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Numbers wise, a top 5 quarterback. Hasn't always had the best health, that's for sure. Cincinnati is a cautionary tale a little bit, but I also don't think that that's Joe Burrow's contract's fault. I think that because they just went and got Dexter Lawrence, you can do stuff. I just think they did not great stuff. And I don't think their coaching is that great. And then Burrow's health has been a part of it as well. But when you could trade for a top 5 quarterback, you're going to do it because your plan would be to have him for longer than just, a couple of years. I'm just going to call this X's. According to ESPN, Anthony Edwards is the next star to leave. Yeah, in the NFL, we haven't heard a lot about that, but this conversation will ramp up. It started to last year with Justin Jefferson. And what kind of the big networks do sometimes is they prod these guys. Like, come on, demand a trade. Would you? Just demand a trade. Like, do it for us. Get to a bigger market. Get to a better, well, the Twin Cities is a big market, actually. I think it's like 15th in the country, but the Midwest is never treated that way. Anyway, but you're right. Like, the prodding of Justin, if this team doesn't succeed right away, the prodding of Justin Jefferson will start. Dan, agree on the comparison to KG. I think that's how it would feel. Bob, Jefferson is maybe the best receiver ever. Can't be replaced. I mean, in terms of like production to this point in his career, yeah, like he's in the conversation at least. Did I not read Skull Shadow? Did I not read your whole comment before? Or are you responding to someone else? Vikings not close to doing anything. Jefferson is 28, not 22. He's expensive and not a quarterback. Give the guy a chance to compete with the team. I mean, 28 is not old for a wide receiver, man. Not of this caliber. Justin Jefferson, the way he plays the game, route running, hands, he could be good until like 34. There's just no way I'm moving Justin Jefferson. I will never be talked into this. Will never be talked into this. No way. That he deserves every single chance as a Viking that you could give him to win here. But sometimes business is business. And if he wants out and won't redo his contract, then you're forced into a corner that you might have to do it. But, you know, saying they're not close to doing anything, I don't know. Like, go look at what people said about Seattle before last year. Like, oh, they're a team with some pieces, but nobody was picking them to go to the Super Bowl. Like, sometimes no one was picking the Vikings in 2024 to win 14 games. Like, we're not really that great at this unless there's great quarterbacks involved. Like, when the light comes on for a team, it can happen fast. Rosters get turned over quick, where Detroit in 2021 is abominable, and then by 2023 they're a Super Bowl contender. Like, that's how it goes. Skull Shadow, tell me a receiver that ever willed his team to a Super Bowl. No, I mean, everyone agrees it's not Jefferson or a quarterback. Like, if you told me if it's Jefferson or Burrow, I'd be like, bye, Justin. Like, of course, yes, the best quarterbacks are going to be able to drive the success. But also, the guy that just won the Super Bowl had the offensive player of the year. You know, also Matthew Stafford, when he won his Super Bowl, also had the offensive player of the year as a wide receiver. The Philadelphia Eagles had two very good receivers. One was like, a top 6 draft pick. The other one was traded for a first round pick. San Francisco had All-Pro Deebo Samuel and first round pick Brandon Ayuk, right? Was he first round pick? I mean, wide receivers are driving a lot of success in the NFL. And Kirk Cousins put up a lot of big numbers with Justin Jefferson. You really need both. You can't have just one. But you can't tell me that Sam Darnold's career turnaround didn't have anything to do with playing with 2 of the top 5 receivers in the world. I think it did. Thank you, Flick. I really appreciate that. Thank you for watching. If we've reached the J.J. McCarthy, Peyton Manning comparison, that's when you have to go, maybe I'm reaching. Jay says, I think we lose a lot of starters in 2027. Teasley can't re-sign everyone, maybe 3 starters. Would you offer new contracts? I would want, if I was Nolan Teasley, to do a lot of overhauling because of call it the rule of 3, like 3-year rule, that every 3 years you probably have to do a lot of moving and shaking with your roster. It's almost impossible to keep a roster together longer than that. I mean, Andrew Van Ginkel, what an awesome Minnesota Viking, but I mean, how long can you keep him into his 30s? He's a really, really good player, but he's expensive and he's really on the older side, been banged up throughout his career. Like, there's only so much you could do from a business perspective there with some of these guys. Even with Brian O'Neill, like, I wouldn't be that shocked if they decide, we're just going to see how this thing plays out with Brian O'Neill. And whatever happens, happens. If we get to the end of this year and we want to extend him because we think we're really close to winning a Super Bowl, that's what I would do with Nolan Teasley. And that's easier said than done. Like, players hold out. There's a lot of pressure. But if I was in his shoes, I would be saying to all the guys looking for extensions, we're just going to wait because I just got here and I can't give you that much money. McCarthy improved over the back half of the season from being the worst starter in history to being the worst starter in the league. no need to double down on his future for sure. Okay, so we've gotten into the argue about JJ McCarthy portion of the show, but I think with McCarthy, he at least is getting his chance. So when people come into comment sections, and I get it, like you want to defend your guy and everything, that's totally fine. And sort of run the same typical propaganda lines that they've been, I don't know, like tweeting for months or seeing from people on Twitter, comparing him to Josh Allen, comparing him to Peyton Manning, all those things. Sort of like, I'm really sorry that hasn't worked out for you yet. I would not just totally say that it's over because you never really know if it's over. All you could say now is that McCarthy still has a chance. He is a car on the track. He has not been sent off. He has not crashed the car to the point where it's undrivable. It's held together with some tape right now, but he's still in the race. That's all you could say. Your comments won't change what actually happened, and it won't change what's going to happen, but we can say that at least he's still in the conversation. I don't think he's going to be the starter this year. I think it's going to be Kyler Murray. But if you told me that he played 8 games, I wouldn't be shocked by that. And I also think that he can learn a lot from the development over the next year behind Kyler Murray or in limited action. Steven says if Jennings, Felton, and Dylan Bell provide some depth in the first half of the season, could see them trading Addison at the deadline to a wide receiver needy team. Maybe there's some of that with, like you're talking about with the younger guys. It feels difficult for Dylan Bell and Ty Felton to do enough to make an argument to trade Jordan Addison. It really comes down to me, are you really good or are you really bad? And if you're in the middle, you're probably just keeping him. But if you're really good, then you're definitely not. And if you're really bad, then you probably should. Andrew, yes, we were talking about you last night, Andrew. You were the guy that we were talking about how, I can't remember what the subject was. Something about like how, because there was a commenter that predicted 15 wins for the Vikings. And we're like, hey, there was a guy that predicted, 30 touchdowns for Sam Darnold. Now I remember it was you. So good to see you. Glad that you're here. Yes, you were the, oh, are you talking about me that I was, or are you talking about yourself? That was the only guy who didn't want to ship him off after the season ended. Oh, that was me. Yeah, that was me about being the only person who didn't want to ship off Sam Darnold. My thing is always going to be, and this goes for any discussion, is let me do as much research as I possibly can. And the research that I came to was there are very few quarterbacks that have played that well and then not been really good. In fact, there was none. Every single quarterback that played as well as Sam Darnold did in 2024 continued to be really good in the NFL. I think the worst was Carson Palmer, and maybe the other worst was Dak Prescott, who are great quarterbacks. So I also think that blaming one person for playoff losses is just not really good form, because when Joe Burrow got to the Super Bowl, he didn't even play great. And when this year Drake May got to the Super Bowl, didn't even play great in the playoffs. Like a lot of it's matchups, a lot of it's how your defense plays, everything else. Pinning it all on the quarterback is just not great when you're talking about the playoffs, because the other teams are great. Their defenses, environments matter, travel matters, schedule matters, like the margins are super thin. So yeah, I thought that it was possible that Sam Darnold could continue to be really, really good. I'd love to simulate the season with him at quarterback. I would love to know what would have happened, because I think what would have happened is they would have been like 500, and people in the beginning, they would have been like 500 or a little better, and people would have been clamoring for JJ. And then the end of the schedule was so easy. I don't think there's any way that they don't win 5 games in a row. So if you get one more win against Atlanta, one more win against Chicago, which Sam Darnold probably gets at least one of those, you're probably an 11-win team. I don't think 14 would have been realistic, but you would have gone in the playoffs at least being somewhat dangerous. And I know you could say, well, you would have had to pay him the franchise tag, $41 million. There was money to be moved around last year, and you didn't have to sign the most expensive defensive tackles. That production came from other free agents. You didn't have to sign the most expensive guard. That production came from other free agents too, including Dalton Reisner, by the way. So could you have gotten back with 11 wins, potentially won the division? Yeah, I think you probably could have. I don't know if you're winning the Super Bowl, but I know if they didn't, people would have said he saw ghosts again. Oh, you're talking about, yeah, the practices with Kyler Murray and the reps. He'll get his reps. He will get his reps. BM says Jets is the second coming of Rice. I suspect his game will age well. I think his game's going to age really well. He's a technician. He's not just based on pure speed, and he's got good size. Dan says whoever wants to trade Jefferson is losing sight of fun being the point of being a fan. That's my point, is that we can't just be like sheer economists all the time and be like, well, this asset is worth this much. Like, this is the heart and soul of the team. Like, you don't want to, and he's amazing. So, oh yeah, great. You could get draft picks who become this good. I don't think so. Lakers man says if McCarthy wins the job, does that mean Kyler gets traded? Because JJ could win the job if reports of him making strides are true. I think, well, so I was there. I don't know if every reporter was there that talked about him making strides. Wes Phillips called it arrow up. I would agree with that. I would agree that the arrow was more up than it was down for JJ McCarthy. I also think it's freaking minicamp, and it doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. Like, it might to the coaches that, yeah, he came back and like looked good and so forth. But I mean, come on. Like, what are we talking about here? I didn't think that the throwing looked way different. Maybe other people did. I just don't believe that any of us, including the coaches, can look at a minicamp practice and be like, oh yeah, this is way different. I just don't know how that's possible, because they're throwing 7-on-7s, like, but it's not just they're throwing 7-on-7s. It's they're throwing it with no physical play with the wide receivers at all, and at about 80% speed, and with no pads on. Like, what are we talking about here? This is just this, and all in total of practices that we saw, they might have thrown like 25 passes 7-on-7. There's not enough of a sample size for me to say, but that's not your question. Would they trade Kyler? I think so. I think that you would prefer to do that, trade away Kyler Murray if JJ McCarthy wins the job and just stick with McCarthy and Wentz. Think so, because I don't think Kyler Murray really makes a backup quarterback. Michael says if we trade Addison, then we have no number 2 wide receiver to take pressure off Jets. We have no depth. Would be so dumb at this time. Only if you think they're going to be good, Michael. There are other people who are like, I don't know if we could really chase the Super Bowl. Then it makes more sense to get the draft capital. And they do have a number 2 wide receiver that had 132 catches over the last 2 years in Juwan Jennings. So we can't throw that out either. But yeah, your point, if you're excited about the season, you think they're going to be good, then you're not even talking about trading Addison. BM, unless a team gives up a second, no point in trading Kyler, incredibly cheap and good backup. That's a fair point that, like, yes, he would be a cheap and good backup. I just look at Kyler as a guy that you can't really have as a backup, because realistically, if he loses the job, part of the reason is because of him, right? The talent is much better for Kyler Murray. He's much more talented. He's much more seasoned in the NFL. He should win the job over a guy who's still learning and is still young and can't throw the ball as accurately. Like, he only loses the job if he can't get the playbook down, if he can't be a leader to the offense. That's the only way that he loses this job. And at that point, you don't really want him as the backup quarterback. You'd rather just stick with Wentz. I agree with you, Axton, that Jefferson being a great leader makes him even more valuable. Yep. Dirty Mike, you're late to the party about the rumor, but I guess you'll have to scroll back to the very beginning, but I'll tell you anyway, which is just that Jason La Canfora floated the idea of the Ravens trading for Jordan Addison. That's really it. BM, I wanted to move on from Sam, thought JJ McCarthy was a lock. Well, that was the one thing for me that I could never really get to. I liked what I saw in 2024 camp from JJ McCarthy too. I reported on it. I was very high on it, what I saw from McCarthy in 2024 camp. I thought he was really good. But I also try in this job whenever I can to know what I don't know. And one thing that I am certain of is we never know anything when it comes to quarterbacks. So it was always kind of shocking to me that they were willing to move on from a quarterback that had performed that well for someone that they had no idea what he was going to be coming off an injury. Like, even no matter how many times you think about it, it's always, when you know the results, like, wow. But when they did it, I did defend it in some ways, but the defense was, well, they know more than me because they're in in there. They're in the building. They've seen McCarthy every day. So if they really believe in this and they worked with him every day when he was, away from the team, injured or whatever. Well, I guess he wasn't away from the team, but recovering from his injury, then okay, they have information I don't have. So I'll defend it as this was the plan all along and so forth. But as we were having those conversations, I remember talking about, I am shocked at the number of people who are totally fine with moving on from a quarterback who was that good. But this was the whole, hey, when you're promised something and you're told this is going to be the guy, that it's going to be like this, then I think it's really hard to, even for the team, like when they thought this is going to be the guy, it's really, really hard to let go of that impression, of that plan. Like, this is what we were setting out to do, and we're going to do it. And that's how we're going to build our Super Bowl caliber team. And, Kwesi said one time, and now I can't remember when he said it, and I hope this was on the record and not off the record or whatever. He said something, but I don't think he would mind sharing this, even if it wasn't on the record. He said one time, my goal is to try to chase the Super Bowl. It's not to just be good. It's not to just whatever. And with JJ McCarthy, that was a play to try to repeat the Brock Purdy thing, where you just stack up your roster around the rookie contract. And even if the guy's not perfect, your team is so freaking good. It was a try. He tried. They tried. KOC tried. It didn't work. And they got to wear that forever. And Kwesi's not here anymore. And KOC's under pressure and all that stuff. You can at least have some appreciation for the try. Now, that doesn't win you an award, and they should be criticized. It didn't work out. And the fact that I feel like I was the only person in the state that said, what if I like Sam Darnold coming back? I feel like, hey, I got that one right. Maybe I should be the one to, lay the hammer on him. And I have at times, but I also do think that it was rooted in this idea that the rookie contract was the way, that was the path to actually competing for a Super Bowl. And that was what they were trying to do. This team has often tried to compete for just good enough. So they did try. It just failed so horribly. Daniel, what do we do if we miss the playoffs or get bounced in round one? Does KOC get fired? I don't think if they're bounced in the playoffs, I really don't think it's a good idea to fire Kevin O'Connell just in general. Without more chances at it, I think that he's had enough success in this first run where I would want to see him go through another roster build with Nolan Teasley and continue to be the coach. But I also know how things have worked with the Wilfs. They fired the GM. They have not had patience when it came to coaches. They fired Mike after missing the playoffs for 2 years. They have not accepted missing the postseason, the Wilfs, with their coaches. So I think they love the culture of KOC. I think he's a great front door for the franchise. That, can't be forgotten if you own the team, that he's a great front door for the franchise. But results are going to matter a lot. If you're riding 2 seasons where you won 13 and 14 games, but you didn't win in the playoffs, is not really a great resume if you only made the playoffs twice in 5 years and didn't win a playoff game. So I think that there is a lot of pressure there, which is why they won't, I don't think, trade Jordan Addison anytime soon. But if you're Nolan Teasley and they go 2-5 to start the season, then all bets are off at that point. Axton, my opinion of Darnold at the time was franchise tag and make him prove that he was the real deal. Yeah, I felt that way too. I thought that was the best way to split the difference, because then if JJ McCarthy was amazing, okay, well, you've spent a lot of money, cash wise, on Darnold for that year. But if JJ McCarthy was amazing or Darnold got hurt, well, all right, well, then you've got JJ McCarthy. But the thing I was most concerned about is what happened with McCarthy, where the inexperience was really the thing. It's experience for the quarterback is a big deal. Jay, who do I think that Jefferson wants to start a quarterback? I think that he wants Kyler Murray to start a quarterback. He's working with McCarthy. He's a great teammate. I think he's working as hard as he can to try to get him to the point where if they got to play together, they're on the right page. But who would you want to start a quarterback if you just had to struggle to get to 1,000 yards last year? Probably the other guy. Lakers man, that's the point. Had Kyler matured enough to learn KOC's offense? Hope he does. Still like Kyler, but have high hopes for McCarthy. Yeah, that's really what's going to come down to with Kyler is I think that with Kyler Murray if he can execute the offense, if he learns it, if he masters it, if he goes home, puts a ton of work on it, comes back at training camp, is ready to go after minicamp, then it's going to be a quick battle and Kyler Murray's going to be the quarterback and this thing's probably going to work. But if he sputters with that, if the work ethic isn't there with learning the offense, like, I don't know, when you stand next to Kyler Murray and you look at his physique, I know he's not tall, it's been noted, but you actually look at the guy, he's super jacked. And you go, it's hard for me to believe that this guy isn't working at it, that this guy isn't committed to it. Like, look at him. So if he, and also in Arizona, like he did a lot of the stuff that the Vikings do, a lot of the pre-snap motions, like a lot of intricate stuff under center. He did this stuff recently, not in 2021, but recently. It's hard for me to believe that he will just come back and not know the offense, but if that does happen, then yeah, I mean, you could be in that situation. Steven, when do you personally know a rookie has it or not? Man, different times for everybody. Really depends on the guy. There's players that I've known right away. Dalvin Cook was like, yup. That didn't take long. I mean, some players told me that they knew Dalvin Cook was going to be a star like first day that they ever saw him. And I would say like early in training camp, you could tell just the movement skill was ridiculous. There's other guys that, you know, Josh Metellus is one. I didn't think anything of Josh Metellus. I was like, whatever, just a guy. And then all of a sudden, what? Wait, what? He's in? He's making plays? He's good now? So everybody works at a different timeline. Justin Jefferson, like it was a weird situation. He got COVID. It was a shortened training camp. And at the end of camp, he started coming along, but I didn't think that Jefferson was going to have a huge year right away. I didn't think he was going to be a bust. I thought that he could have a great career, but I thought that setback was going to be problematic for him, and it was not. So you never really know. You never really know. BM keeping Darnold, drafting a receiver every year, things I'm right about. That's, yeah, I got the certain hills that have been proven. I think that that's the research. It's good to draft a receiver every year. Andrew, Kyler is good off script, not good at reading defense or reading a playbook. I think you mean there. Yeah, I mean, Andrew says, when I studied Kyler Murray, hated what I saw, except when he runs around and goes off script. Him and KOC, I just don't know, man. Well, you were super right about Darnold last year or 2024, so I'll give you that, Andrew. I think that I don't entirely agree about like watching Kyler and grade off script. I've actually thought that Kyler was in the last 2 seasons did a lot of his best stuff just when he was throwing on time. And I thought some of the off script stuff was where he got himself in more trouble throwing the football and was a little less successful than he was back in 2021. I think if you're talking about early part, like there's really 2 careers for him. It's pre and post ACL injury. Post ACL injury, I thought he played much more from the pocket, much more on time, and then only occasionally went off script when he had to. The off script stuff is so up and down. It's like a 10-yard sack or a 20-yard run. And that's what they have to try to even out. But I know what you're saying. I think that that's a little bit more early Kyler than it is recent Kyler. But that was my observation from watching his 2024 film. Anyway, well, thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. I appreciate all the questions, man. I mean, I'm really glad that so many of you had opinions and thoughts on Addison, which really, you know, turned into a lot more different thoughts on so many other things than just Jordan Addison. So I'm really greatly appreciative that so many of you could tune in tonight. And I plan to be live again tomorrow night because I wanted to make sure I give you 3 a week during the off season. That's what I promised. And so that's what I'm going to try to do. And then during training camp, this is where I have to, you know what I'm doing here is I'm training the vocal cords to be ready for this. Training camp will be every single practice that they have. We will be live on this show breaking it down. Every single practice. Could take a lot of notes out there. So thanks everybody for all of your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, whether you're for or against, whether you want to wait, whether you want to see, a lot of great, interesting perspectives from all of you. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Thanks everybody. Football.